Although they did start working with the Beals revolver in the year of 1856, it would not be the same as what you think of the Remington New Model Army today.
And if you're like me, you're into the history stuff, the books, like the guns, are worth their weight in gold. Because a gun, it's fun to shoot, it's fun to point with, but without the story there, if you're a history person like I am, without the story, it really doesn't mean all that
Ruger Security 9.
Can I redraw?
You already looked?
No.
You sure
right.
you didn't?
Now on 3.
Another pro, at least a pro to me, is these guns are kind of a project. I like to look at them as I'm getting an advanced kit build in the mail whenever I get one. So it's a project that you can go down the road and you can either leave it as...
Most people believe that the Walker was Colt's first extent to a very, very large pistol, but it wasn't. This was. This is Colt's 1839 to patent firearms revolving carbine pistol. It is massive.
Hello, everybody. We are back. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can everybody out there in the chat hear us? We have been on hiatus of having an actual real chat about a subject for about, 2 months now. And so we decided things kind of got caught up, and Duke said, let's have a chat. So we decided to kind of get back in the rhythm of things. Will we be having Tales of the Trails next week, Duke, at some point, maybe?
Yeah, hopefully next week. We're going to see. If not, it'd be the week after.
Okay, and Duke also has some new Johnny Reb and Billy Yanks up that I haven't even got a chance to see yet.
Got one up.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I uploaded it about an hour and a half ago.
I like your hat. That's pretty fancy hat you got there, Duke.
It stands up a little tall like a shako, but I need to work.
Oh,
it'll get worn in.
Gonna go through who all's here. Some people have been in here for like 45 minutes. So Louisiana Gray's here. Said he's looking forward to the show. Cornelius Sula's here. Said that's 3:30 a.m. over here, and I have to get up early tomorrow. I have to go to the Polish embassy and save Poland from the libs with my vote. Wish my people luck. Well, good luck.
Good luck.
Kodak Tackman's in. He says, can't wait. No apologizes in. Yeah, no apologize. If you're watching, that's 8:30 Central. Louisiana Gray is in. Impatiently waiting. And let's see. Chris Klein is in. He says hello. Diane Houston says good evening all. Task Force Tyler said, is Walter White going to be on the stream? Not tonight.
Not this time.
Maybe soon. Maybe really soon. We'll have to get him. This is just us getting back together and getting our feet under us again, because we're not really used to doing this like for a while, like the way we were doing it. Glenn Sweet said made it. Christopher Mead says good evening. Desert Rat 45 says get it rolling. Carson Branham says buenas noches. George Gooding's in. Deja Vu said fun stuff. Gots Loco's in, says good evening. Deuce is Wild. Victor Schultz, Garza Vlogs. Hello all. Guns of the West. Hey, Walter White. We need to get you back on here.
Hey, Walter White's here. I'm sorry, Dustin. I'm sorry.
We didn't name you that. The other people in the chat did. Lagging Leland's in. He said, is Snafu the new breed of turtle?
Pretty much.
Carson. Okay, Carson. We got Gunsmith 4570. Mark, just Mark. Number 1, Big Bear is in, and Gina Wood says hello. I didn't see any questions in there yet, guys, so let me explain what we're doing. Tonight is all about Colt cap and ball revolvers, which is near and dear to all of our hearts on this screen. And I'm pretty sure the other two have studied up on it more recently than I have. Duke started out before all of us making videos on replicas that were pulling in, some of them hundreds of thousands plus views on. And he was reviewing replicas and talking about the history of it. And I myself have a 9-part history series, and it runs, the entire series runs about 7.5 hours, covering all the details I could possibly cover from the Patterson to the 1862. And of course, Snapper, as you can see behind him on the wall, his claim to fame.
The village idiot. I'm the village idiot that just rumbles and says stuff on the channel. That's all.
No, he owns the originals. He owns many of the originals, even the rare ones. So and of course, he has a lot of knowledge on the subject himself. Tonight, this is going to be like a hymnal in church. This is one of the reasons we're doing this, is all of us are in a place where we can get a hold of our Haven and Belden copies of the history of the Colt revolver. And Snapper, being the guy he is, has some special edition.
Yeah, my wife got me this one. It's got like gold, real gold trim to it, and it's got this really cool
hand sewn,
fancy,
hand bound.
Yeah, it was some really crazy expensive version that she found me, and man, I love it. It's actually, I kind of feel bad about even opening it because it's like, man, it's such a nice copy. I need to get a regular copy to use, but it's made to be used.
That's
so it's going to get
funny.
used.
It's like your copy is pristine. Duke's copy is like original, what it was.
Old
and
school.
Mine is like, I don't even have the pages staying in mine anymore. This book has traveled with me. But if you guys don't know, these all three are the same book. A History of the Colt Revolver by Haven and Belden. This book is actually written in the 40s. But I think Duke gave a review for this on Amazon. What did you say in that review? I think I read your review on there once.
Oh, God, that's been so long ago.
It's the closest thing to like the Colt Bible you can get.
Yeah,
this is the best information you can find without actually going and digging through all the paperwork yourself. It's pretty much the best you can get.
700 pages. The only thing is, it basically goes from the 1830s to the 1940s. So you're going to get a lot of Colts Woodsman and stuff in the end, but it covers pretty good a lot of the things that you're going to be looking at. Of course, it's not the only one you have, but if you only have one Colt book, I would suggest this one, wouldn't you, Dick?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's dated, but I mean, the guys in here got more knowledge than what anybody has scrapped together for. But this really is more towards, if you're into firearms curation like a museum, or if you're a firearms collector, that's kind of where this is going. But it is dated. There are some things that we know now are probably a little bit different. Like one of the ones we were talking about just before we went live, it says it was built as a prototype, probably built in 1842. It's actually, if you read the 1847 Colt Walker book, when they were developing the Walker revolver, it describes that particular prototype to a T. So that prototype's actually
really does.
47. But other than that, I mean, it's great info.
And we all have another pile of books at our feet, but the reason we're all doing this is because we can all turn to the exact same page and call the page out, and we all know exactly where we are and what we're talking about. But unless Snappers is some different edition, I'm not sure.
It seems like we got the same pages. So
what I love about this book is, like I said, 700 pages of information. It's not something you sit down and read like cover to cover. I've tried it before. I got into the Army and I quit. But it's just when you're thinking about a certain gun, it's very easy to find all the information. Like the general information is going to be in the front. The letters in the history are going to be in the center. Advertisements, prices, and parts are going to be in the back. And so it's very easy to find all that stuff. And what I love about this book is there is not one reference by, to, or from R.L. Wilson in this thing. It's that sweet spot.
He had to go.
It's that beautiful golden era before he decided to there's two big things that happened to Colt that screwed all their information up: the fire and R.L. Wilson.
Yeah, no kidding. And so it's like some of it's a little dated, but it's easy to track down what's dated for the most part. Let's get over here to a few comments before we get started. Guards of Vlog said, the Colt Bible. Yes. West Alabama Sports and Outdoors said, finally getting to watch live. It's been having to watch them after they are over. Well, let's see. Deja Vu has a question here, or a statement. He says, I have heard that the conversions to 38 Special are not accurate. Is that true? Thinking about getting a pair. 38 Special isn't going to come along until 1898. And so, but that's something we can delve into here just a little bit, because Duke actually has a really rare replica conversion in 38 Special.
Yeah, I wish I could find the 1860 to go along with it, but yeah,
that would be cool.
You can't handle them in live chats.
Yeah, I know, because I literally have an original right behind me, and I can't pull it out to show you guys.
So I've got
a Rumble.
It's a Type 1 Richards Mason conversion, which is not 100% historically accurate. The barrel is not quite right. It should have a loading lever hole underneath the barrel, which it doesn't. But other than that, the rest of it is pretty accurate. But 38 Special, the reason they converted them is because 38 Colt hasn't been around for a long time. So they're all converted 38 Special, which I've been told you can shoot 38 Colt through a 38 Special. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
So if that's true, you can shoot them through there, and you could shoot the original.
I think if you have the later 38 Colt where it has the expanding bullet, you can shoot it through a 38 Special. But if you have the early heel-based bullet, I don't think you can, because it's far too big to go through the barrel.
That's true.
Now, here's my thoughts on the subject. It's just a difference, basically, in 38 Special is a little longer case and a heeled versus a non-heeled bullet. I would get the 30, if it was me, I'd get the 38 Special in a heartbeat, load that dude up to the same pressures as 38 Colt with black powder, or shoot it smokeless if you want. But if you want to be historically accurate feeling about it, all you're doing is you're going down from a true 38 to a 357, and it doesn't bother me.
And that's how you shoot. If you want to shoot an original, you could shoot 38. I mean, that's technically the brass I use is 38 Special. I just use it. Well, mine has the barrel been lined, but before the barrel would be lined, you just use an expanding bullet. Like the way the mini ball, it has a little hollow cavity in the back, so it expands to the rifling. That's all you do. Just use a regular 38 Special. It's a tiny bit longer, and as long as you seat the bullet deep enough, you're fine. And it works fine.
Just to piggyback on that, the 45 Colt conversions are farther off than the 38 Colt conversions because they have to actually make the cylinder bigger and things like that. But I don't find, unless you're like wanting to be absolutely 100% authentic, and in that case, I guess you could just go find you an original, but none of them are perfect.
Yeah.
The only downside to the 38s is that the timing of the cylinder and the ejector rod, they do not line up. None of them do. So when you turn that cylinder and it clicks for you to eject the cartridge, on a 45 comes right out. On a 38 it doesn't. You hit the cylinder face because that ejector rod is setting just about a tenth of
the hole's smaller.
Yeah, the hole smaller is exactly what it is. On the 45, it's the edge of that. On the 38, it's catching the cylinder face. So they can be a pain to load and unload.
Quick question on that. That is something I've noticed on mine, being it's a Type 2 Richard Mason. It has the arm, the hand, the same style hand as on a single action Army, where it actually has the two paws instead of a single paw, like a regular 51 Navy cap and ball or 1860 Army cap and ball.
Right.
I wonder, is that normal for yours as well? Because mine seems to line up okay. Like
yours is an original though, right?
It doesn't really have to do with the hand. It's just that when it clicks off of the hand,
the half cock spot when you can rotate it and line it up, mine lines up pretty well.
So no, what I'm saying is that the center of that chamber lines up right where it should, but that don't line up with the ejector rod where the dam.
So what you have to do is you have to run your ejector rod to clean clicks is all. You get a feel for it after a minute. It's not.
Yeah.
It's
like as soon as that comes in line with that ejector rod, start turning push the ejector rod in, and then turn the cylinder to where it comes out, and then release it. Whereas the 45,
hey, that actually reminds me of another question. Because I've never got to play with the replicas too much. The ejector rod on those replicas, are they like? So the original one, it actually has this where you push it and you have to spin it a little bit before it can go back. And like a single action arm, you can just push it straight back. But this thing, you actually have to kind of rotate it and then pull it back. Is that right on the replicas as well?
Okay. Mine is about like that. Yeah, you almost got to rotate it before you can push it down.
Because if I push straight down, it ain't going to go anywhere. You actually have to rotate it before you can push it down.
That's actually a design that carries all the way through to the 72 open top. And they changed that, of course, with the 73 with the bull. I love the 73 ejector rod system, especially with the bullseye ejector rod plunger. But
I should say that mine did do that, and then I fixed it.
You fixed it.
Yeah, okay. That went in there where that little notch is at. I just filed that out, so it just pushed.
Makes it easier to fall. Okay.
So let's kick that out of here. That was just a question we had. I'm going to go scroll through here and look for any more questions. Did you play the new Red Dead Redemption 1 port? No, not a new one. I've only played the old one. Hardy says, hello, silly humans. Tuco the Rat said, I want to build a conversion race gun. I think you could do it today with good steel.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody sells spring kits that you would like. I don't know. I've never been into building race guns, so I know that both you and AR have been talking about it. I don't see why you couldn't.
I don't see why you couldn't either. It shares a lot of the similarities with the single action army. I mean, it just doesn't have a top strap.
Action's the same, basically.
Pretty much the same, yeah.
The only thing that I advise against it is I've fan fired a 1860 Army. That blast of gas coming out because there's no top strap
of the top
was not going up my nose.
Oh, really?
Because I was tight to my hip and I fanned it and it boo. Oh, Jesus. Just hot air up my nose.
Carson Brandon.
And it would be neat to see a race gun that's open top. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, Carson. I've talked about that. And then I saw what snappers look like, and I was like, I want to do that to mine too. And I don't want to buy a new one because they ain't making any more of them, so I want to keep mine as long as I can. Let's see. I'm looking for questions. Once again, Snapper, the question is vast. Only bad guys wear masks. Are you a bad guy?
Yes. I'm the evil Snapper. This is the evil version of Snapper. He's the only guy who comes on the live streams. The ones on my videos, that's the good Snapper.
Okay. Uncle Chaw said, I'd rather have a shootable gun over historical accuracy to an extent. I want to throw that to Snapper because he hasn't changed them where they're not historically accurate. They can always go back, but you have taken things like Colt, Thunder, and Lightning and made them shootable more today, easily shootable than...
Yeah, I'll look at... The way I look at it is it like an original gun. If you have an issue of parts or availability of ammunition or anything like that, you can add a part to a gun, an original part, modify a part, don't modify the gun, and make that part fit to the gun. So like you say, like for me, 41 Colt is kind of a pain in the butt. I'm finally gotten it all together and it's not a big deal, but I like the idea of shooting 38 special, basically is what I was shooting out of it, with hollow base bullets out of my Thunder in 41. And it works. All I did was use a different cylinder. I used the Lightning cylinder in the gun, which was all nice and pretty and timed, and then I just made bullets for it. And I've done that with a lot of guns over the years. If I can't find a part and I want to get the gun running, especially some of the restorations I've done, it's one of those things like I want to get it shooting, but I might not find this part for years. So why don't I get either a replica part and modify it to work on the gun, so when I originally find it, I can add that real part to the gun, and I'm good to go.
Yeah,
I got a phone call on it.
Okay, so lifted above.
All I say is
here.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
My big thing is don't modify the base of the gun. Modify the parts to go onto it, so you can always take that gun back to original. It's not a big deal with parts.
Mm-hmm. Lifted Above said 38 Special followed 38 Long Colt was a magnum of the cartridges at that time. Yes and no. In 1898, there were quite a few cartridges. I mean, I see what they did with 38. They wanted to take that caliber and make it better, and so they did. But 44-40, 45 Colt at that point would have been big. And we've talked about this a lot. 40 grains in both of those cartridges make them really, really powerful. And I'm going to say here, probably more powerful than the Walker in the 45 Colt. As a matter of fact, I just watched. Stay tuned, guys. I'm waiting for the day. It's coming. It's coming.
I can't wait.
It's coming.
But Garrett's had a theory for a long time that we're pretty sure is true.
Duke had it first.
Oh,
the
did he?
7.5-inch Colt might be more powerful. A 7.5-inch single action Army might be just as, if not more powerful than the Walker.
Yeah,
and there's just little reasons here and there that make that able is bullet weight, and a cartridge is not losing as much pressure out of like the nipple hole. Just little things here and there.
Primer's giving it a 10% boost.
Primer, because they're using mercury fulminate, which that is a little more potent than the modern. Well, I won't say it's a little more potent, but it's more potent than what that little percussion cap's going to have.
Caplet, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have a question here. Hiram Hillbilly said, I'm so glad you're all on. I've been wanting to ask you, also Willard McBain, about the conversion cylinders, specifically Colt 3rd Model Dragoon and Howell cylinders. I don't know if any of us have, I mean, I've been around them, but I haven't bought a Howell cylinder, but I think Snapper has. Have you, Duke?
No, I haven't.
Conversion cylinder, but I don't remember if it's a Howell's or if it's a Kirst.
Yeah.
It's a 5 shots for 1860 Army. It's a 5-shot with a back plate.
Yeah, so some of them you got to grind out your recoil shield a little bit or some of them are just pop-ins. Good point. All right, bringing us to our book. Let's talk about 3rd Model Dragoon conversions.
Sounds good to me.
Where is the page, or was it in this book? I'm sure it was in Haven and Belden. You know what I'm looking for, Snapper?
Which one?
The Dragoon conversion of the 1850s. Let's see. I believe it's in the conversion revolver section. Because there is a historical precedence for it. And I just got to find it.
You talking about the ammunition it used, or?
No, it was in 44 Henry, I believe, but hot 44 Henry.
Yep.
And
let me know. I'm slowly getting to that area. Finally.
Well, might be back here in the conversions. Sorry, guys. We'll slow down just a little bit.
Sorry.
Cap and ball percussion revolvers. Blast powder.
Here's a Dragoon old model holster pistol with a self-expanding metallic cartridges. I think that's the.
Which one we looking for?
Yeah, this is the 44 rimfire. This would be the at 133, Garrett.
Yep, just got to it. Page 133. And what we have here is a Colt Dragoon. I believe this is a 3rd model. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Yes, 3rd model.
100% a 3rd model.
It has what people consider now the Remington style conversion cylinder for 6 shots of 44 Henry rimfire, and it's got the adapter on the hammer.
And turn to the next page, and you have the pocket model of the same thing.
Yep.
Except for that one's gated, I believe.
Nope.
Oh yeah, this one's gated. Are you sure it's not?
That old model pocket pistol, it's a back plate.
It is a back plate. It just looks different because the holes are cut different.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that brings me to this. I was told for years and years, if you put one of the back plate conversion cylinders in a Colt, you are not historically accurate because that was only a Remington thing. Well, here's one in the 49 pocket model, and the page before has a back plate. Like this type of cylinder they sell, like real cheap. Pull them in, drop them out, take the barrel off the switch. That is historically accurate to Colts as well as Remingtons.
And I believe Colt did that first, did they not?
Well, that one says 1855 or no, it's 1860. I lost
this one says
now.
Well, the page I'm on, it says probably converted in the middle 1860s.
Yeah, because it has to be after
versions. They were doing that beforehand, but Remington had all that patent, so Colt didn't do that till long after Remington had started.
Yeah, but it's historically accurate if you want to do it, at least for those two guns, and I would assume for all of them if they got those two. Okay, Hiram Hillbilly asked to add on to that. Is there pressure maximums or speed maximum? Jake from Everything Black Powder always shoots the cursed and is loading 30 grains with a 355 hard cast. What about smokeless?
Black Hills cowboy load.
Yeah.
You don't want to
low pressure.
750 feet per second.
Here's what I would say, and some people have told me I'm wrong on this, but this is the way I understand it. That's good steel in that cylinder that will take a light smokeless load, and I don't know. I'm sure they'll tell you what it'll handle. They are not made, and they will not they will not warranty them for hand loads, and nobody's loading black powder, so obviously they're warranted for some smokeless. So the thing of it is, the rest of the gun is still made with the lower grade steel. As far as I can tell, some people say, no, they make all the Italian replicas, even the cartridge guns with the same steel. I think that their steel's lower on the grade quality on the cap and ball revolvers. So, although you still can contain that blast in the cylinder, beware that jacketed bullets could rip your rifling out pretty quick in that soft steel barrel. So you want to stay with lead, I believe. What do you think, Snapper?
I would agree. I wouldn't use jacketed bullets that much.
What smokeless you use? Because I know of a guy that's the barrel split. He split the barrel.
Yeah,
so the cylinder handled it, but the barrel could not.
Yeah,
that's a really good point as well. Is it being even open topped? It's really, really, really high top, hard loads. It's possibility you're going to start breaking stuff. So
yeah. When you're talking about. Go ahead, sorry.
You don't want to peen out your wedge or your wedge slot because, even though you might be running a smokeless load that's not that potent, it's potent enough that when it smacks into that barrel, it's going to try to push that barrel forward. And remember, that barrel's not screwed in like it is on a Remington. So that's one thing that Remington reproductions, you could get away with a little bit hotter loads on them. You're not going to get away with that on them Colts.
My thing would be, I would not be afraid in a 45 Colt conversion to shoot the Plowboy 40 grains of black powder and a lead bullet. And you will actually get better performance out of that round, I believe, than you safely can with the smokeless rounds of the same. Because to get up to 1,000 feet per second like that one's going to do, you're going to have to push that gun past what I would consider safe for smokeless for the barrel itself. But that's just my opinion. But I think a Black Hills cowboy load smokeless, I bet you'd be
trying to remember, but I think my uncle on his cylinder, it says don't exceed 750 feet per second.
And you know why? Because they're talking about smokeless.
Yeah.
And so that's the cowboy.
Black powder load, black powder load, you're not going to hit that pressure. Because
you get down the barrel.
The smokeless, your smokeless load doing 800 feet per second and a black powder load doing 800 feet per second are going to have two different pressure waves, completely different pressure waves. Smokeless is going to be a high pressure wave real quick. That black powder is a slower pressure wave that builds up.
Yeah, and he's asking about it. If you've got a way to test it, I would say, and I don't know what powder you're using, obviously. Personally, I like a unique at 6 or 7 grains. You can go up to 8 grains and get to 900 feet per second, and you'd probably be just fine. But remember, this is the lower grade revolver than what they sell as like I would shoot 8 grains of unique at about 900 feet per second in a a Model P reproduction. That wouldn't bother me one little bit. But like I said, I don't know how well your barrel, and I don't think it would blow up on you if you pushed up to 800 or 900, but I don't know if your rifling would handle it.
And for God's sake,
soft lead, you
put a red dot in it.
Yeah, no, nothing like that. Okay, so moving on. Everything Black Powder's in. Hi, I was just talking about you.
Hey.
I'm day late and dollar short as usual. Yeah, guys, go check out Jake. He's over on the I Love Muzzle Loading podcast. They just did a podcast with him the other day, and it was really good. Task Force Tyler trying to start a fight. Red Dead 2 is communist propaganda. Prove me wrong.
Oh boy.
That's your son, Snapper. Deal with you.
You know what happened to that little cute kid? I don't know what happened to that little cute kid.
Okay. Gina Wood said, Duke, I'm drinking Coke tonight, and I love the short of Johnny Reb.
Good.
I'm gonna.
My mama was.
I'm gonna scroll through here for questions. If we don't have, we're gonna get on.
I'm out tonight.
Yeah, Two Color Rat said it's interesting. 45 Colt is a beast in full power. Yeah, you're gonna get 1,000 feet per second out of a 7.5-inch barrel with a 40 grain charge of Swiss.
The thing of it is like 44 Magnum's not that impressive because 45 Colt can do that too. You're just not gonna do it in our historic guns.
Yeah, I just did it the other day in a Ruger Blackhawk. I exceeded
Ruger Blackhawk. Yeah,
I exceeded standard 44 Magnum by quite a bit with a
one of
45
my
Colt
buddies
Red
up
Hawk.
there in Wyoming. He's got a Ruger Blackhawk 45 Colt, and he bought some bear loads. You got to be a bear to shoot them.
Yeah, I still have a scar on my hand.
And he's got the big rubber grips on there too. And I shot that, and I thought, God, 44 Magnum feels like a kitten compared to that.
45 Colt it's always been my favorite round. It's just so versatile. Versatile.
Arian King said, nice beard. Doug Duke said, hi, Duke.
Hey, Doug.
Okay, Harry Hardy wants to know, I wonder how common it would have been to see a Colt conversion like that, or was it just a one-off thing?
Well, there probably a few of them around.
I think it's a good idea. Why wouldn't you? And the thing is,
not a Colt conversion. That is a conversion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, as soon as Colt starts making the conversions, they're going to get rare fast. But yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't. Is that bandana historically accurate?
No, they had to pay.
This is my beard.
Let's see. My house stated to keep it at 80 or 8. I think he meant to say 800, but James Singer said 80 FPS or less. I think he meant 800, regardless of powder type, lead only. Well, like I said, you have to remember they're not talking about black powder because they're just assuming you're not going to do that. But black powder, I promise you, it'll handle 40 grains, especially in the Dragoon, because the Dragoon is designed to handle 40 grains to start with.
Well, heck, I mean, there's people doing the walkers where they'll even use like the 4570 case down. So it's like 50 grains you can get into it.
Well, that's what is that one gunsmith guy? Can't think of his
name. It's like the 4555 walker or something is what they call it.
45. It's the 4550 brimstone's what it's called. They call it.
Is it?
Yeah, there's actually two. There's the one that you're each talking about a different one. The 4555 Walker is something that's a little newer that they've just come out with. You're talking about one that's been out for a few years, Duke.
Yeah, that one, that Brimstone, they're using a 460 case. It's cut down a little bit, but 6-shot conversion, they call it the Walker Magnum, and that thing, they're shooting just black powder, but holy crap.
Yeah. I would bet unless they're doing something, they're going to get loose before very long, unless they're doing something to those arbors.
That's a heck of a lot more than 60 grains in a round ball. Technically, that's quite a bit more than the pressures you're going to get from 60 grains in a round ball.
I think they're shooting a 250 grain bullet over 50 grains of black powder, something like that. I don't remember, but it's huge.
Something like that. It's huge.
Doug Duke said conversions done by private people too. All modifications can be seen no matter the gun. But I think that pop-off back cylinder would be fairly common. Like I said, we've already picked 2 out of the book. I bet if we went through that book, we'd find 4 more if we dug a little deeper.
I'm sure. And that's a really simple setup too. And then you'd still be able to go back and forth. Well, depending on the hammer, depending on how you set it up, you might be able to still go back and forth.
Yeah. And they're talking about 45 ACP. Just so you know, 45 ACP, they're caving under 950 feet per second because 45 ACP is a higher pressure round than 45 Colt. Even though, because there's less room in the case. Let's see. And they're still talking about that. The Jurgis Rud. Hi, Snapper. Remember me? I asked about your 1882 Colt 2 years ago. Then you featured it in your very first video. Saw your stream.
Yeah, I do.
Say hello.
Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Yep. Gina Wood said, Snapper, glad you're on. Black Powder Firearm Enthusiast said, good evening, everyone. Carson Branham said it's the 4550 260 Brimstone.
There you go. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. Gina Woods.
Oh, boy.
This, I have a feeling, is not Gina Woods because of the way this question came out. I have a feeling there's a little CBJW over there who's trying to start something. So here's the question. I think Remington came out with the first top strap, didn't they? I don't think Colt did in 1855, LOL. Okay.
Oh, boy.
You would be wrong. Colt did not come out with the first top strap in 1855.
So
find it, Duke. Paging. I don't know if the top. I think that's Caleb.
No, where's Ethan?
He's not here. He's took his wife out for vacation for her birthday.
Oh, I was gonna say, send Ethan over there and have him slap Caleb upside the back of the head.
I don't think
what I'm looking for is in Haven and Belden, but no, they had a Dragoon prototype with a top strap.
With a top strap. Yeah, I've seen that thing. I thought I swore I saw it in Haven Belden.
And it is a
Patterson
forward. It's a tip forward barrel. So Smith and Wesson can
right, hang on. I got it. I know that one. The tip forward.
Yep.
It's in a different book.
And then in 1855, they released the first top strap. They had another top strap design that they had patented prior to that, and they didn't put it into production. It was just that 55 was the first one put into production.
Yeah.
I really think Colt went with the not having the top strap just because of the main fact of black powder fouling and just ease of continuing the gun to keep running after a while.
But any way you look at it, if you consider the Beals their gun, they beat the Beals by with the top strap by 3 years, and they beat the new model Army by what? From 55, if you count the 55 as a production gun, yes.
Yeah,
right. And we could do that. We could call it just production guns. Yeah, Colt beat them to the top strap.
I mean, look at even at the Colt revolving rifle. I mean, it's a top strap as well.
The only thing that Remington ever beat Colt to was getting the patent rights to put through cylinders.
I thought you were going to say the only thing they beat them to was patent infringement during the Civil War because nobody cared.
Patents that expired, but I thought there was a section in here on prototypes, but I don't think there is.
I have that, and if you guys want to carry on a little bit here while I find it, I know it's in here. I'll show you some. How about a 1860 Army with an automatic capper?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That thing's cool, isn't it? Yeah, I really think we should do another show one day, like the one we did on my channel, but do it through this, of all the really crazy and weird Colt prototypes. I mean, there's some neat ones out there.
Yeah. And I know that's in here, but I don't know.
I mean, like the zigzag revolver. Colt did that way back in the day.
Yep.
There it is.
You found it?
You find it?
Found the patent drawings. Top strap Dragoon.
What page is that?
That is page 564.
Page
oh yeah, way out of the
way. Everyone please turn to page 564. And
64.
How great thou art. That's
I see you're in the. That was a good idea, going to the patent area. 64. Yep, right here. Isn't that just so cool? And it has the what guns like that? It has a tip up, and the top of the entire top strap is basically a giant spring that you would flip up with your fingernail, and then it would tip forward.
Let's see if I can get this to show up. You see the hinge, the top strap.
Actually, that one doesn't have a hinge. That one's got a locking link, but the hinge came actually in the prototype that was produced.
The hinge looks like it's on top of the barrel, on top of the strap.
Yeah, there's a hinge at the very toppy.
Yeah, but that comes up. And then there was a locking lug down there, and you turn that lug, and then the barrel.
Locking lug on the bottom. You turn it. The barrel
got it.
That picture's not the tip.
Tipped up.
The tip up.
Gotcha.
That actually went into production.
Okay. I don't know if they actually sold it in. Is it?
Well, I say production. That's the first prototype, or one of the first prototypes they produced.
Yeah.
And this patent was in 1850, September 3rd, 1850.
Yeah, it was pretty early.
That's crazy.
No, I don't believe that.
This thing right here. This is that locking lug. It's.
I see what you're talking about. That bottom lug looks like it would unscrew, and then the barrel would tip up.
The barrel wouldn't tip up; it would slide off. So you turn that, and so that would release a little pin, and that would slide forward, so you take the whole barrel off.
That was not a Maynard. That is the Gettity.
Oh, excuse me. There it is. It's down there.
Priming hammer.
This is the tip up down here, so you can see the screw there. The top one.
Yeah.
Is a different. The barrel slides forward. This one, the barrel tips up.
I see. Yeah, I see. You're looking at one side versus the other. Okay, I get. You most notice that that's the first model Dragoon.
They're two different variations. So
yeah.
The barrel's not a tip up. This one over here, the barrel is a tip up.
What's the date on that patent? I checked the page.
September.
It said 850.
What?
Yep, on both.
So that tip up.
If you look at the cylinder, it's a first model Dragoon.
It's not for loading. It's so that you can get your cylinder out and clean it without taking the barrel off.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So the tip up, you drop that, cylinder comes forward, and then they had the other one, which the barrel slides on. It locks in with that nut, and then they had another one that was like a Lamat, where it had a nut that went in the front and screwed on.
Yep.
But the tip up was the only one that they produced a prototype of.
Stephen Polano says the Root Dragoon by Colt prototype. We were just talking about that earlier. We were discussing what most people believe is the largest Colt handgun put into production is the Walker. Power aside, biggest way. Snapper's pretty sure that that is not the case.
Well, there's several guns that were bigger than the Walker.
Why don't we start with Duke's because he comes earlier? His comes later. Yours comes first, doesn't it?
I think mine comes. You know what I think mine was? Mine was the rifle. They took the shotgun basically and they converted it into a revolver. Yeah. And I believe which one Duke was is they actually sat down and designed a revolver from the beginning instead of taking it from like a rifle to try to make it either smaller or just as a better revolver. The one on this, it's just basically the earlier rifle. If you cut the barrel off and you cut the stock off, and then you just put a grip on it. I mean, that's basically all it was. They made a lot of them too. Yeah, I got a picture of it right here.
Okay, so and this is actually a production gun. That is, what did you say? 52 caliber, right?
Yes, it says it's a 52 caliber, 52.5 caliber.
And how many were made?
Oh well, this one says this is serial number 919.
So that means you're pretty close to the number of those made as Walkers.
Now, what I'm curious about is this serial number? Like, I was just thinking about this. Could this see the same serial number line as the shotguns and rifles? Like, did they put those in order, or would this been 919 revolvers? Because that's a lot for the Patterson company.
Well, we've talked about this because we always thought, I always assumed Patterson's there was around 5,000 all together made. Duke, you don't think you think there's more than that, right?
What's that?
More than 5,000 Patterson's made? Shotguns, pistols. We had this discussion years ago, and I don't know.
There's a few more.
Yeah.
There
were quite a lot.
I'm going to do a share screen here with that prototype tip up.
Go ahead, do it. If you can figure out how.
Crap. There we go. So you'll have to add. There it is. So that's that tip up.
Boom.
That's the one that slides forward, isn't it?
No, that's the one that tips up.
Okay.
Yep.
Or does it tip down?
That looks like it tips down, dude.
Or tip.
You got the screw at the bottom.
The back of it, the muzzle goes down.
Yeah, gotcha. So it's a top break basically.
Yeah.
That says Colt Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Colt patent.
36 caliber.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that does say a Navy, but no, it's a Dragoon. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a Dragoon. I was like, that would be a lot of gun for 36 caliber. That'd be a lot of weight to carry around.
I don't know.
It might be a Navy, guys.
I'm pretty sure that. No, I'm pretty sure that's a.
Look at the grip. What is that?
It looks just like a Dragoon. I mean, that looks just like a first or second model Dragoon with a modified barrel and top strap.
Snapper, does your original Dragoon have this sharp point across the back of the trigger guard where it comes back into a curve and backwards and sharp instead of forward?
Like that one? You're talking about you're talking about the trigger guard itself, like it has a square back trigger guard.
Usually they're square, I get that, but that one looked like it had a curve and a sharp
point. I can't show anybody, but I'll look. Yes, it looks pretty sharp.
Yeah,
it's probably wore down a little bit over the years.
So that's the first one that we know of the big 50 caliber revolvers, and they made. We can assume around 900. But Duke, you were talking about the second one, probably the second big revolver. Yeah. What were you talking about there?
So this one,
that one he pulled up looks a lot more like the prototype Walker, right?
Patterson. Oh, okay, well, this is the first. I'll show this one here. So there's the Patterson Colt pistol variations. This one is, they think, about 1842, just before Colt went out of business. There's that big behemoth.
I bet you. That's exactly when they said they wanted a 45 caliber. He was like, I already got a gun in mind already.
But that's not a 45 caliber.
That's not a 45. That's a 52.
Right. But didn't the military say they wanted a 45 caliber? Or did they actually not specify that?
This one was actually for the Navy, according to this.
They specified.
I'm talking about when they came back with the Walker.
Yeah, the Walker.
Oh, yeah, the Walker was 44, yeah.
They specified the gauge, pounds to the...
yeah, so...
right. So I'm guessing is that gun was there, and that was the first thing in his mind. He's like, I already have that gun designed. I'm already almost there.
Colt was trying to get this Navy contract. He was trying to sell them carbines, but they wanted pistols that went with the carbines that used the same cartridge, and that's where this pistol, because this is basically that carbine, that Patterson carbine rifle cut down and made into a pistol form.
Yeah, so... He's playing with this a lot longer than before the Walker.
Yeah, and those are Walker.
Yes.
I got to find it now.
And I really think that's a lot of the reasons why he jumped on it so fast and said he could get it done so quickly is because he kind of already had the design.
Hi, Pilgrim. Gray Pilgrim's in.
Hey, Gray.
I think the reason he jumped on it so quickly is because he was wanting to get that firearms because he had no plan. He had no way to produce them. That right there is the Walker prototype.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
when you read the description in that Colt's own record 1847 book when they're developing this, it's that to a T. Only this has got a shorter barrel. They wanted a 9-inch barrel. This one's got a 7-inch, I think.
I love how
is it me or does that handle look like a Griswold Gunnison?
I love how that handle shows its era because this is a big, heavy gun. They want that flintlock style single shot forward grip that you get on a flintlock of the era or an Aston or something. it's a lot more leaning forward, and that would go on and carry on actually into the Griswold and Gunnison too.
Gunnison, yeah. Matter of fact, I got her back there today. I decided to bring her out.
I see her right over your shoulder. Justin, just having fun, says, have you shot the Walker with a pistol stock? It's a lot of fire and sparks too close to the face. I enjoy pistols and with shoulder stocks.
Yeah, I did. I have the skeleton shoulder stock that I bought, and I put it on that gun, and it's you're right. You're a lot closer. I kind of shoot it more of a like way back, but that's a lot more carbine than pistol in a weird way.
Yeah, and that brings up a replica here. Steven Polano says, I have an ASM 50 caliber 3rd model Dragoon, not historic, but cool. Yeah, I've seen that. Mark Hubbs has one too. I've seen it shot on film.
That was, if I remember right, that was a prototype that Colt put forward, but the 1860 Army changed a lot of that. Because when, what was it, Rock Island or James Julia, one of those two auction houses auctioned off the Colt prototype collection that had that Root Dragoon in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of prototypes in there, and if I remember right, one of them was a 50 caliber 3rd model Dragoon.
They tried all kinds of stuff.
If you could think of it, somebody at Colt at one time did it. I'm sure it's insane the amount of
like 40
stuff that they did.
Types. There's 40 some odd prototypes in that auction.
There, because I've done a lot of study on Springfield. I've done a lot of study on Whitney. I've done a lot of study on the firearms industry at that time. One thing the Colt factory always had, to an extent, that nobody else had was, you invent it, we will at least talk about it. The time that failed him was with Roland White, and he turned him away. And they paid for that later on. But earlier on in this time period, it's like we promote innovation to the best of our ability. Everything's new. There's nothing set in stone. By 1855, there's still nothing set in stone. What we think of the revolver, even though everybody's like, yeah, it's been around since 1836. The revolver of 1836 is night and day different than a revolver from 1848. Those two guns are not even close internally. So it's like, even by the Civil War, it's like, can you think of a gun that came out 10 years ago, and we're like, yeah, we know about it. But even like Glock came out, 35, 40 years ago at this point. So it's like, it's
there hasn't been that much innovation. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing at this point. It's like everything is so new and fresh in this era.
Yeah.
Let me speaking of that, like crazy things they did, let me show this this Dragoon again real quick. Let me pull it up just to show everybody. It's got this really neat system. We pulled it up on my live chat once. We couldn't figure out how it worked, and I actually looked into this gun a lot more, and I learned how it worked. So if you look at this Dragoon, if you look right back here, you see that little lever right there?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look right here on this plate, you'll see there's a bottom plate. Well, there's a tiny plate right above it. And that little plate right there, when you cock the hammer, this plate would slide forward, and it has a diagonal cut in that plate. If you look onto the cylinder, there's these little protrusions coming out. And those little protrusions catch on that, and it rotates the cylinder and also locks it. They were looking at this to try to make less internal parts for the gun, because this would only mean you had that slider, and that's it. Like the linkage to the slider, and that's the locking, that's the rotating, that's everything. And it would, once you fire it, it would retract.
No hand, no bolt, no.
Yep.
Nothing. Yeah, that is it. And it would make it extremely simple and basically fail-proof. Now, that was a prototype to the point they didn't even cut out the, if you look at the cylinder, it doesn't even have the nipples cut, nothing. It's just a cylinder that they threw on the gun, right?
So that would eliminate 2 parts and most importantly, eliminate 2 fragile springs.
Yep. And I think the whole point of that was to say, hey, like, let's make something that you can, like, so robust for the military. They didn't get too far, but that is technically a zigzag revolver, but in reverse. Yep. The zigzag has that zigzag cut on the cylinder with just a little protrusion out the top that makes it spin. if you flip that where that little protrusion is on the cylinder and the zigzags on the revolver, that is the very first zigzag ever right there, that Dragoon.
Thing of it is, though, that's kind of ahead of its time because that would take an inordinate amount of hand fitting.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's probably why they didn't make it that far. And they even did make a zigzag revolver out of a
55, the root.
In 55. Matter of fact, it was the same year as this gun. This gun was designed and built in 55. That and somebody flipped it and they made a zigzag revolver.
Well, that somebody
Colt was producing prototype and doing that so that nobody else could tag in on that revolver.
Well,
that's what it was. He was keeping everybody out of the revolver business by designing actions that couldn't be used. It's like the oil business buying out all the new carburetors on cars that do 80 miles to the gallon to keep them out of the market.
Exactly. So somebody comes up with something that, hey, I can get around Colt's patent. Nope, you can't. He already has a patent for that.
Winchester, everybody did it. Winchester did it too. They patented so many of Browning's.
Like, okay, we're going to stick with this design, but I want you engineers to come up with ways to get around my design, and we'll patent it so nobody can get around my design.
Well, I think
that's like 100%.
I think on the route, the zigzag came out first, and they actually produced and sold.
Yeah, they did. I'm getting to that root revolver here. Here it is.
I got a video on that, but
is that root revolver?
But
and this is 1855 as well.
That's a lot of fitting and precise fitting,
and it starts getting expensive.
I think you're right. I think they could have done it, but it would be a lot of work. Like on a machine, getting that set up at that time. I mean, that is some hardcore fixturing.
Well, they would have to build the machine for it. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Yeah. Why do we maintain in American military history, whatever? Why do we maintain? Why is it in 1890 our revolver frames look the exact same as they did in 1873? Why does the, for instance, why does the 1888 trapdoor have the exact same profile as the Springfield 1895, except for it's gone through 3 different changes of ignition system? It's because they're still using that same machinery, and machinery is the hardest thing to replace. Stock making machinery is still being made on the same thing, and that's what they would have to build a machine to mass produce that, I believe.
And from 1851 through 1873, the only thing that changes on that frame is a top strap.
Yeah, and it actually goes on to 1940.
Yeah, that frame.
And you know what's
action is identical.
Yeah.
What is pretty crazy about that too is I guarantee you the fixturing setup they use to drill the bottom 3 screws for the alignment for the trigger guard is probably the exact same one from the 51 Navy through probably the 1940s. Because if I could take a part off of 51 Navy and then stick it on a 73 and they line up perfectly, that means it was fixtured with the same machine, most likely. That is hard to do. Getting holes perfectly drilled in 3 different locations over, a certain distance. Anybody who's in any machining, that is not something you could just lay out and smack with a hammer and then drill it and then, hey, they'll line up. They won't. You have to have it fixtured for that much time and that much ability to go through for screws and the entire frame to fit without even filing nothing. It fits perfectly. And that is astonishing they got that done in the late 1840s, early 1850s. Elijah K. Root was a genius.
Mm-hmm. And you know why? I finally, when I used to read Root stuff, I'd be like, where in the world does this guy come up with it? But then I finally, when I stepped into Springfield and some other stuff, I realized there's about 5 guys at this time, and I can't remember all their names, with the 2 being Erskine Allen, Elijah Root, the core engineers of all these companies. They're not as much in competition as the companies. They're writing letters back and forth. Root puts his fingerprints all over the first trapdoor, even before he died. I think that there's probably some Erskine Allen and some Root stuff. And all of them are using the machinery made by a couple of guys that worked for Roswell Lee in the 1830s. So they work, even though the companies were at contention with each other. Private letters were going back and forth. These guys, they were friends, and they kept the innovation rolling between each other. Like one of them would get stumped, the other one would be there, be like, I can help you work through this a little bit, and later on that person will help me work through this. So
I guarantee you that's exactly what was going on. Just because the fact that these guys are engineering and they're at the top of their game. They're the best in the world.
Yep.
If you're going to want friends, like people, your friends are who you become. Your friends become you. I mean, you are who you hang out with. And if you are the top, you're only going to want to speak with other people that are going to keep you entertained. And if there's only 5 or 6 people in the world that are the best at this, those are probably going to be your 5 best friends, like in the entire world. Who cares if they work for somebody else? Because if they have the genius technology, if you're stuck on something, it's easy to reach out and say, hey, I need a little help here. Could you help me?
Yeah.
And
the real story
I really think that's why so much of it. Yeah.
The real story about that I find so good is when it comes to the Springfield muzzleloaders. The 1861 model that would carry on to 1863, that gun was made, and basically a lot of that was done by Erskine S. Allen, even though he wasn't the head at the time. He was involved with a lot of innovation on that gun, which is just an 1855 without the Maynard tape system. But they gave that same gun to Colt and said, you make us the prototype of the Colt special contract. It doesn't look anything like the 1861. The barrel bands are different. There's screws. 61 doesn't have screws. There's barrel band. And what's funny is they send that thing back over there. Erskine Allen looks at it, and guess what? The 1863 looks just like the Colt contract musket. The next one does. Not everything works on it, so the 1864 combines the two things of those two guns that works the best and comes out with the ultimate, in my opinion, muzzleloader at the time for military service. But that's how they worked, and it was really interesting stories. The letters are insane between those two.
Yeah, I've always noticed when it comes to engineers, especially at the very top, there's not a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Where they're so full of themselves that they don't want to share or talk to other people because you can only innovate so much. And if this is your hobby, what you do, just like us 3 right now, we have a common interest in something and we're talking, right? I mean, that's how I believe it truly was with them, and to the point that they would probably share almost anything. Because they cared about the overall engineering and technology. They didn't care about the small, the little stuff. They cared about the stuff that they weren't going to be alive to see anyways, years later.
Yeah, and one of the reasons Colt's contract musket was different was because he had already bought the older infield equipment because Elijah Root had gone over and set up the infield factory for England. And so the infields coming into the South, those were basically built on machinery designed by Root. And so he already had this machinery. And so it's funny how the Springfield migrates as a muzzleloader. Starts out all Springfield 1855. By the end of the World War, it's about half Springfield, half infield. So it's kind of interesting. Jeremy Gunslinger's in. He says, hello, everybody. Greg Pilgrim is, he said, he, like firearms addict, always blames him for raising his books budget. Let's see if there are any questions in here. Sleepy Leap said, I don't know what he's talking about here exactly. He said, I hear the Remington has a safety in the hammer, the old model being a 4-click.
Safety in the hammer. The hammer falls between those notches between the cylinders. So whereas Colt had pins, Remington had notches, and actually that Remington is a little bit safer of a gun to do that with.
West Covina Dodge is in.
Howdy, West Covina.
Howdy.
Mauser made and patented zigzag, Gray Pilgrim said. Yeah, that would have been way later than I think than the zigzags in the 1840s and 50s. Sleepy Leap has a question. How do you fellas think the 1875 and 1873 from Cimarron compare? Remingtons are a bit forward balanced, I hear. They're both fun to shoot. How's their Remington's ergonomics?
I've handled one. I haven't shot it, but I've handled it. And same problem with the Remington New Model Army. is that the hammer's a little far forward for me, so it's harder for me to cock, and it is forward heavy because they keep that stupid bar underneath the barrel long after it serves no purpose. And the way the ejector rod's set up is it's always getting caught when you put it in a holster. But other than that, I mean, it is a Colt. And that's one thing that, Remington copied Colt on. All of the firearms companies copied Colt on is that it's basically a Colt action, just a little bit different style to the frame.
Yep.
Because, you look inside there and Remington, other than they reduced it from 2 screws to work the trigger bolt to 1 screw, it's a Colt action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's still the exact same thing. It's just, they just modified it a little bit to be a tiny bit different, to not need all the 3 screws overall versus the 2.
Yep.
Well, they actually just put that 1 screw inside.
They moved the screw from the bolt.
They just moved it to the inside of the gun.
I think if you want real good firsthand, is my camera look fuzzy to you guys?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, all of a sudden,
you
got to focus.
Yeah, a second ago, it just went autofocus.
Yeah, it's close enough. But if you, Sleepy Leap, if you want hands-on experience from somebody, I would go comment on Plowboy's Ghost channel. Any of his videos, he'll probably answer you. He's handled both of those to a great extent. He still carries both of them sometimes. So I know he has a lot of experience with that, with the Outlaw.
Very well balanced.
Yeah.
I have a little bit with some of the original Outlaws, but they're mostly from shows of just looking at them, playing with them, and I feel like they're a lot like a single action army. Just the ergonomics, to me, I think the single action army is better balanced and just a little bit better ergonomics. Yeah. Very similar though.
Yeah, Gray Pilgrim said the working together of engineers is the joy of the industry, but he blames the American system. He said, blame the American system. All the industry loved it, but there's a hidden claw. That system was invented by Colt. That is something I get a kick out of every time I watch a documentary or something and they say Henry Ford invented the assembly line. And I'm like,
interchangeable parts. It's like, what? They were doing that a long time ago, way before Ford was doing it.
Colt invented it. Now, Ford did improve it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Colt said Colt did not invent the revolver. He improved it. Ford did not invent the assembly line and interchangeable parts. He improved it. Yeah.
Interchangeable parts is the American system he's talking about. Interchangeable parts in America by the Civil War was Springfield, Colt.
Yeah.
Everybody but Remington. Remington didn't get that interchangeable parts thing down till after the Civil War, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I think it was is they started too late and they didn't have the expertise at the time. But it looks to me like the ones that I felt that are like late 1860s, once they got it dialed in, they were nice guns. But the early ones, like every original 58, style Remington I've ever played with, they're not that nice manufactured.
If you read the letter from General C.C. Agur, who was near the Department of the Platte and during Red Cloud's war up here, he basically comes right out and says that the Remingtons are poor revolvers and they're in such poor condition that the soldiers that have them have no confidence in them.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sad.
We up there had them at that time, and they didn't like them. And the minute they could get Colts, they did.
Yep.
I go ahead, Garrett. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead. I was going to move on to a comment, but finish your thought.
I was just going to say with the 58 Remington, especially the Remington guns I have messed with, it's one of those things. So many people love them, like especially the 58 Remington. But it's one of those things people love them from what they've experienced with the replicas, not the real ones. The real ones are not. A matter of fact, I think the very worst replica I've ever seen was still better than the best original I've ever seen. So.
Hardy had a question. He said, would you say the Roots and Allens and such company were the best engineers in the world in general at the time, or just in regards to guns? Here's what I'll say to that.
That's mostly what they were doing, yeah.
Well, no, Root was a machineman. Right?
Yeah.
That was like he didn't invent. Once again, he didn't invent the Lincoln patent milling machine, but it was unusable until he got his hands on it, and the rest of the world used that thing for 75 years after he fixed it, and he patented his changes to it. He made rifling machines. He was one of the first ones to come up with a way to automatically machine gain rifling before it was always done by hand. He built machines like even in Haven and Belden. If you go to the patent area, machines for making cartridges, machines for making cartridge boxes, but there's one letter I have read from Colt. It was to Congress where a senator stated that Elijah K. Root was the best engineer in New England. So I would say that, and Allen, he's a different cat. He's guns. He has people build the machines for him, and he comes up with ideas for guns. Root, on the other hand, starts at the base and has to build everything from the ground up. I would say that Root was probably one of the best in the world. I don't know. I'm sure some Swiss watchmaker was a better engineer somewhere, but in my opinion, especially in the firearms world at the time and probably in the machining world, because like I said, England hired him to come set up and build machinery for the Enfield factory. I would say he was definitely one of the top.
I would say I personally believe he was probably one of the best engineer in the production world at that time. Mm-hmm. Not engineering things, but engineering production lines and understanding of factory production. He was probably the best engineer in the world at that time for that. Mm-hmm.
And what you also have to realize about both these men that you're talking about, Allen and Root, they're not only genius engineers, they are factory foremen at this point. And Root will go on to become the factory president. And so he is not just engineering, he's running the factory day to day, everything. So,
he pulled a very common engineering thing, though. It's kind of sad. Yeah, very genius, but not very good in marketing.
That's exactly right. He literally, in 2 years, almost ran the Colt Firearms Company into the ground.
He knew what he was doing, but he was not a marketing man. He was a numbers guy, but not one of the, I'm going to sit there and, show flashy and try to get you to buy my product kind of guy. He's like, no, this is what I have. This is what I'm selling. That's it.
He lost the 1860 Army contract because he thought he would not bend when the government says we got to start buying them cheaper. You're $10 more expensive than Remington. I've always said this. Colt wouldn't have liked it. Colt would have snuck around behind the government's back and wrote a bunch of letters to a bunch of congressmen, but he would have never came right out and said no. He never was like that. It was always, well, let me work over here and see where I can bend the rules just a little bit. Oh, so yeah, that's.
I don't think Elijah K. Root ever saw bending of rules in his entire vocabulary.
Yep.
He seems one of those kind of people that he's one of those straightforward, analytical people. That's it.
There is 2 plus 2 equals 4, and there is no bending or getting away from it.
Yep.
Great Pilgrim.
And it's kind of funny because that is kind of a meme in the engineering world. You're good at engineering things, but you better not be the boss of the company.
Yeah. Guns were the work that made Western civilization. Sleepy Leap said Plowboy likes both. He said he found the hammer reach was not as pleasant as the Colt on the Remington. Or not as pleasant as the Colt. Interesting. Like my new model Army plenty. Let me get through here and let's do some more talking about old cap and balls. Browning invents button rifling. Yes, and they were the cream of the crop, but we're talking about a completely different type of rifling, Carson. This is the type of rifling that would be used in target rifles and still be used in Carcanos clear up in the 1940s. And it's the slope, it's the design, it's the ability to understand the ballistics of the twist too. So it's
an ever-changing, constantly changing profile through the entire barrel. It doesn't stay the same. Starts off at one angle, almost straight, and then it slowly gets tighter and tighter and tighter, towards the end. So it was extremely difficult to manufacture, or even come up with a machine to manufacture it.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy Gunslinger said, "Sorry, I'm late. I had a live stream with the Black Powder Maniac shooter." Cool. Mark's a good guy. Sleepy Leap said, "I do like some weight in the barrel." Okay, still talking about that. I'm looking for questions now. Jeremy Gunslinger said Colt invented the first inline pistol and rifle, and I'll die on that hill. You know what we're talking about, Dick?
No clue.
Maybe it's something later. I'm not going to read that task force. It'll just make people upset. Eli Whitney.
What did he write?
He just said he thinks you're part of Antifa.
Really? You are so grounded when this is over.
Eli Whitney, Desert Rat said Eli Whitney had a lot to do with the manufacturing line and interchangeable parts. The American pattern of manufacturing is all about building guns. Hall, North, and Whitney, Gotzloco said. Gray Pilgrim said Jonathan Browning, he invented the harmonica gun. Elijah Root was a genius. Yes, he was. Gray Pilgrim said that. Deja Vu said John Moses Browning should be sainted. His designs were a large part of saving the world, World War I, World War II, still used by the military to this day, 100%. Let's see.
Yeah, I'd say he's the closest gun person that you would put a saying. That guy has his finger in everything that's modern, everything, and he probably will for the next 200 years.
Yes, Carson Branham says, was not Eli Whitney and John Deere major contributors to the American manufacturing system as it came to be? Yes, in a way, but Eli Whitney could never come close to the machinery design that made his assembly line work like Colt's. Eli Whitney, although he's credited for interchangeable parts, I have shotguns from Eli Whitney's factory in the 50s and 1850s and 60s. Nothing's interchangeable. I mean, I got a shotgun over there at Caleb's that's from Whitneyville. And I think that's why he doesn't get the credit for it. He may have worked with the idea, but Colt was the one that ran with it. And let's just say that Colt may have ran with a few things that Whitney had early on and did a better job. Yeah, I think.
It is something to remember, guys. You don't ever have to invent the wheel. You just got to learn how to make the wheel better. That's it.
Yeah.
Or do it better than somebody else.
Yeah, and Gray Pilgrim said, look at how many firsts worked at one time in the Colt factory, even into the 1950s and 60s. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Diane Houston said Remingtons would have worked back then if they had Blackie's gun better. Yes, they would have.
Oh, boy.
Excellent. I don't have my bottle right here with me to show you.
I can't say better than that. My goodness, that is top notch right there.
That's funny.
That is funny. That is hilarious.
Said, I guess that's why we know Edison's name rather than whoever first came up with the light bulb. The nerdy inventors didn't have the business chops to market the product. Exactly. Gain twist rifling. Yes. Rod's Vintage Gun said, greeting, guys. Sleepy Leap said, Colt using gain rifling reminds me of Colt Pythons using tapered bores. Very much.
I love the gain twist.
I see what Jeremy's saying. He said the definition of an inline is everything in line with the primer. Before Colt came, everything was side lock. Colt Patterson was the very first to have everything in line with the hammer, primer, powder, and bullet. Well, ish. There were some others before that were in line, but not with primer style. There was some weird flintlock designs that were like that, even stuff that come up from the bottom. But yeah, I'll agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. 1, 2, 3 more. I wonder if it's even feasible for an American company to reverse engineer a lot of Roots machines and put the Italians out of business making repros. Well, they weren't running on electricity. They were running on belts and water power for one thing. But it would be a lot easier than building those massive machines today to produce things and put them out of business. Let's put it that way. You could do it for a lot cheaper than those machines. You could have to sell a pretty expensive product, I think, wouldn't you say, Snapper?
I think that if you put at least like 1.2 million into CNCs, like the smaller, cheaper CNCs, and as long as your designs were good and you perfected it and got it very nice, you could easily do it. It'd just be a lot of work, and a lot of risk. But I would say that the difference is the machines they were using back then, it required a person to pull a lever or do something and watch it. A CNC today, you stick it in there and there's one guy who watches 10, 15 parts get made, and a CNC could make things with extremely high tolerances. Which when you're pulling on a normal machine that would use an end mill, that end mill slowly gets smaller as it gets duller. So your tolerances change all the time. And the biggest thing is that's why they would have a person to check it right after. Oh, the tolerances aren't right. We've got to switch out these or get them resharpened or whatever. But with a CNC machine, you can actually have that built into the program so that you don't have to do anything. It's there, and it's that one machine can do what 50 machines could do. So,
yeah, Lifted Above says, whose wild idea was gain twist anyway? Almost assumes the bullet is doing muzzle velocity when it first hits the rifle.
Well,
it was
when it hits, it's going straight, and then by the time it's out, it's
the whole idea was to get as much velocity without it stripping out the rifling, right?
Yep.
Like they were worried about a certain time, it just starts stripping it out, and it doesn't really
let up as fast either. It's not going to let up as fast with a round ball or with a conical. It doesn't have a lot of surface contact like some of those earlier conicals, because you're just contacting one point, so it's not going to. Whereas if you do like a longer bullet, like with the Carcanos didn't do very well because you got that long bullet. Well, when that long bullet gets in there, the front of that bullet is turning faster than the back of that bullet. Something's going to strip into the rifling there somewhere. So once you get the long bullet, you got to have the exact same rifling all the way through.
Yeah, it's.
I think they shoot great.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think the original Colts that I have with Gain Twist, they all shoot wonderful. I have no problems with it. I think they shoot better than the replicas do. Like, they hold a better tolerance, or yeah.
It was on before Root automated it. It existed in high-end target rifles, going back to Jaegers. So I would assume it's a German thing, but don't quote me on that. Yeah. But it was invented in the time and mostly used in the time of round ball, because when you're shooting a round ball, you have very little bit of that ball that's actually circumference that's actually touching the rifling. And so if you drive that thing at, even if it's not doing muzzle velocity, if you drive that thing at 700 feet, it jumps the cylinder gap through the forcing cone and then hits that rifling. It's not going to spin. It's just going to. And honestly, that's why a lot of people complain that they have bad accuracy with a lot of replicas today. I think it's not all of it, because you can shoot a lot of bullets, get your casting harder or softer. But back in the day, that was just a way to keep that round ball spinning, and it worked pretty good for that.
And when I've cleaned my black powder guns, I've always noticed that there's lead chunks down at the back of that barrel.
Yeah.
After you shoot.
And I don't notice that too much with the originals. Like they don't lead us that they do not lead very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to
jump it in straight rifling.
Unless they're loaded
they're jumping in
front of that cylinder where they're going into the forcing cone and starting the twist. If they're starting straight, like my Walker's the worst because I load 40 grains, and how it maintains its accuracy that it maintains, I don't know. But it's jumping quite a ways before it hits that rifling, so it does strip off a little bit. You might have a hair or a bug or something in front of your camera lens, Garrett.
Yeah, I'm going to fix it, to try to fix it here in a minute. Everybody's talking about it. But a few more comments, and then I'll go to working on it.
Just give it a wipe down.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a way to spin up softer bullets without tearing them apart. Just going through that a little bit, guys. That was pretty well the last of the questions. Pratt & Whitney were major manufacturing machine inventors. Yes, they were. All those were. But I also have to say nobody did it like the Colt factory. Nobody. Even the people at Springfield in the 1860s would send stuff over there because nobody did it like the Colt factory. So going on, why don't you two start with let's go backwards in time a little bit. Let's talk about one of the most underrated guns, in my opinion, the Patterson. We've been there just a little bit. And since we're talking about that, why don't you two talk about, I'm going to get out of here if you guys want to go on that subject or whatever you want. I'm going to step out of here and try to get my camera to focus.
Okay. Well, Duke, tell everybody about the Patterson.
Well, it's overly complicated early design, but it worked.
I think what I get Garrett's going at here was, everybody likes the Walker because it's this big and it's crazy expensive, and they didn't make that many of them. But the Walker really never did that much stuff. Like historically wise, it was kind of a mediocre thing. It more or less sat around than actually did any real fighting.
It was
Patterson, though.
Prototype basically that got thrown into combat.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And it was basically just a long, heavy version of the Dragoon. That's realistically what it ended up being.
It was used extensively by those Texas Ranger units that got it, and they used them very well.
I know Garrett found that there was like 500 Walkers that got put in storage, and right before the Civil War in New Mexico.
Yeah, there was some of them that did, but there was 280 some Walkers that were issued to Jack Coffee Hayes' Texas Volunteers, which were the Texas Rangers. And when you follow their exploits, it's like, yeah, they were using them extensively. They were using them well to the point that they were blowing the guns up. They were blowing out barrels. They just used the hell out of them.
Here's my question on that was, how long did they actively carry it before they went to the Dragoon? I thought it was only like 2 years tops.
Yeah, the Dragoon came out pretty quick afterwards. So they were swapping over to them because if you look the picture of John Rip Ford, he's got a pair of Dragoons, and that's not too long after the Mexican-American War. That's like 1850, 51, somewhere in there. So
like my
swapping over, but
my Dragoon would have been made. It's kind of weird. The Colt, if I look at the serial number of my Dragoon, it actually lists 2 years and 2 different guns technically, the Fluff Dragoon and the first model Dragoon. And the reason they do that is they've never actually looked at all the Dragoons, and they don't know which ones are Fluff Dragoons and which ones aren't. So they say, oh, you look, if you have this characteristic, it's a Fluff. If not, it's this. And I used to thought it was just a regular first model, but after that, mine was supposedly made by the Colt numbers in 1848. So that is, half a year after the Walkers, not even half a year after the Walkers actually hit the service.
Right. Yeah. Because the Walkers, all of them were delivered by, I want to say it was almost by August. I think they pretty well delivered on the contract. Because I know the first ones got issued to the Texas Rangers in October.
October, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That was right around the time Walker was killed.
By December of 1847, Sam Colt is set up in Connecticut with his new factory, and he is basically modifying whatever leftover Walker parts he's got. He's modifying them down to not blow up in service. And when you look, it's in Haven and Belden. I don't remember exactly where, but they talk about it's about 1/10 of them blew up during trials in early 1848. So it was out of 200 and some, out of 1,000 he delivered, it was 100 of them blew up, which the Army considered that acceptable because that's about how many muskets would blow up. And everybody says, yeah, the muskets didn't blow back then. No, the muskets blew pretty hard back in the day. So even though, we've had that discussion with.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, dude, but when they would test a musket, they would just test the barrel itself before the whole gun's assembled, right? And then with the revolver, they actually had to build the entire gun, and then if it blew up, that was an entire gun.
The barrel would be tested, and then the military would test the whole musket.
Okay, but the cylinder was tested at the same time as the entire gun, right?
Yeah.
So if you had a catastrophic failure, you lost the gun.
Yeah, maybe your hand with it. But yeah, so that was that thing. We've had that discussion of if the ball got halfway down the barrel, would it blow? Well, the Army tested that, and a lot of them failed before they ever even went into service. So that's why they had such a high fail rate. But after that, you modified that, and by the time you get into late 1848, it's down to 3 out of 100 are blowing up. And by the time you get into 49, it's even less than that.
They're getting it figured out.
I think what it come down to, it was the metallurgy. A lot of that had to do with the metallurgy. But if you're reading Sam Colt's on record, he talks about because Sam Colt did not manufacture the cylinders. He contracted them out.
Right.
Contracted out. He had the barrels contracted out to a different company. And when the cylinders come in to be reamed and fitted to the guns, they said that they were breaking reamers because these cylinders were so dang hard that they kept coming out.
Let me say it. He said, okay. He said, heat them till they're soft as lead.
Yep, to anneal them. Heat them up till they're soft as lead.
That might have something to do with it.
When you do that, well, if Colt's not heat treating them back to what they needed to be heat treated back to, if they're just heating them and quenching them, you've suddenly changed the crystalline structure of that cylinder, and now you've got something that, whereas before, it probably could have withstood that, now it can't. So what they should have done is they should have had the company that was making them ream them out and then heat treat them.
You would think they would. I mean, I'm guessing that the company would send them basically the cylinder with just the engraving on it, and then they would have to actually do the drilling and reaming and all that stuff.
The cylinders were not lapped and reamed in the chambers. That was done at Whitneyville.
After.
The only thing that was manufactured at Whitneyville was the grip frames and the actual frame of the gun. The harbors, all the small parts. That was manufactured at Whitneyville. The cones were actually there was another company. There was another company that made the cones. Another company made the cylinders. Slater and Brown made cylinders, and I forgot what company made the barrels. That's part of the reasons why the cylinders were bright. They weren't blue because they're coming in the bright, and they're just being put together and thrown out there to meet the contract.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing of it is, they didn't go out and really test fire them, the first batch anyway, because Colt was already behind schedule on delivering that batch by a couple months. So the first 250, they really don't get tested. They get delivered, they're loaded up on a boat, and they're sent to Mexico. And by October, they finally are getting issued to the Texas Rangers. Now the Mounted Rifles never got them until after the war, because the Mounted Rifles, when they showed up, the boat that had their horses sunk. And the Army basically said, all right, you are now
you're infantry.
Infantry.
You have no need for revolvers. And so the only one that got the revolvers was Walker himself. He got his personal pair that was a gift to him. But the Texas Ranger boys managed to work it around. They got issued those revolvers. And they're really only,
correct me if I'm wrong, but they're really only in that particular area of the war. They only used them one time in one place.
They used them a lot because once they were issued in October, they were running back and forth, and then on their way down to Mexico City, the biggest use they got was in Mexico City.
That's what I'm saying, in Mexico City.
I knew that one.
Yeah, they put them to heavy use in Mexico City, but they put them into heavy use all around that area because it was constant fighting down there. You read about it, and it was just every day there was some little fight popping up here and there.
I had figured that by the time they actually got the 250 issued to them in late, because it took a little while in October, so late October. See, I assumed that by the time they got them into battle, there wasn't as much. The heated battle was calming down at that point. They was already in Mexico City.
The big regular battles, yeah, those are pretty well heated down. This is battles with what they were considering banditos.
Yeah, so like walking down through Mexico City and the big where they got in trouble. That's what I assume. That's what I associate the Walker with, in my opinion.
There was smaller. Basically, it was guerrilla warfare at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Garrett, it's not a war crime the first time.
So when the soldiers were marching out between Veracruz, Mexico City, Matamoros, and Mexico City, those supply lines were getting hit daily. And so they sent the Rangers out there to quell them. And they did quell them. The Rangers fought 2 battles that I know of in Mexico City, big battles. Well, I say big battles. They had pretty good-sized fights. One of them, the Rangers were down on the lower part of the buildings, sleeping, resting. And then, this militia, if you will, comes up on the roofs and starts shooting at them. And so they take their rifles and their pistols and they just start popping them off of the rooftops up there. And then they come charging down. And the leader of that crew gets killed. I think it was by Jack Hayes. But yeah, they use those revolvers to great extent in Mexico City, outside of Mexico City. But it's not like a major battle where they're lined up, thousands of soldiers. This is small. This is basically Missouri.
Skirmishes.
Missouri borderlands.
And then they got sent home.
Yep, and then they get sent home.
Because they used it a little too good to an extent down there one night.
This here is a decent one. I know Doug Duke says that this one has a few errors in it, but it's not bad. It's got some good info in it. Excuse me. But yeah, it talks about some of the little battles that they had that go on with that. But yeah, I think it was October. I want to say it was October 28th. That was end of October. They got the revolvers. But yeah, I've got tons of books on these because I was trying to track the Patterson and the Walker around, and there's lots of. They used a lot of them, and a lot of these Texas Rangers too were still using Pattersons. And
so that's actually what we probably should have started on, because I ended up getting on a little small tangent here about the Walker, but we should be talking about the Patterson.
Yeah, see,
in my opinion, the revolver of the Mexican American War is actually the Patterson. Because
there was
the Walker gets there.
There are quite a few of them being used. What ones are still out there? Because if I remember right, it was like 14 revolvers. Sam Walker, when he was still, before he became a captain of the U.S. Mounted Rifles, when he was still with the Texas Volunteers, lost 14 of them in the Rio Grande.
Mm-hmm.
Something like 14.
And that's Patterson, right?
Yeah. When Stephen Watts Kearney went over to California, they had a lot of Patterson revolving rifles and pistols. Lost a few of them over there. All the Rangers would still had their Pattersons that were issued to them by the state when they joined up. So yeah, they were around. So there's probably about as many Pattersons around during the war as there was Walkers.
But they would have been around a lot longer. And the thing about the Walker is they're going to start turning them in within about 6 months after they got them.
Mexican-American War lasts 2 years. Just almost 2 years exactly. The Walker is going to come in to play in the last 9 months of the war.
See, when does that actually end? Because I thought it was November, but maybe
it was I think it was May of 48.
Well, that's about the time they had to start turning their Walkers in.
Yeah, well, at the end of the war, that's when they started turning them in. They just turned in the ones that didn't work.
As far as major battles go, I'm pretty sure there were no major battles after October of 47, maybe one or two. But...
Well, like I said, it's not a major offensive, but there are smaller offensives that are just as important as the major ones.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. It lasted 1 year, 9 months, 1 week, and 1 day. February 2nd. Started April 25th, ended February 2nd. But
so they were there for about 2-3 months of the war.
3-4 months, yeah.
But there was still some fighting going on because if I remember right, reading in here, I think it was like in May.
Mm-hmm.
They're still having some fighting. Let's see. Because the guerrillas, the Rangers had to go after the guerrillas, is what they call them.
Mm-hmm.
See, and this doesn't give dates. That's one problem, is they don't give dates in this book very often.
See, that's what I find so amazing about the Walker. For all the credit we give it, its actual true frontline service life is like 3 months, 4 months, maybe 6 months for their start. Even the Rangers turn them in for the most part, except for the few that kept them, for Dragoons.
Right.
It's like very, very short amount of time.
I'm still curious to find out how many walkers were actually used in the Civil War.
In the Civil War, not a lot.
Okay, so 500.
I know there's some.
And if Doug Dukes is watching, he can probably correct what I get wrong here. But as far as I know, 300 of them go back to Colt for conversion of parts into Flak Dragoons and transitional models. Right? So there's around 100 of them, we believe, right, to be lost completely or destroyed, right, Duke? Around 100 of the order. So there's 400 accounted for. Means there's 600 out there. We know that a number of them were given to friendly natives. And I would assume that's around 100 because 500 of them end up in the Santa Fe Arsenal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know when they ever come out of the Santa Fe Arsenal, but it's assumed by a lot of people that as soon as the Confederacy takes over, and they do take over everything from the Santa Fe Arsenal, they would have gone out to the Confederacy. At that point, though, they also pick up a lot of Dragoons from the Santa Fe Arsenal and 51 Navies. And so my question would be, even if any of those 500 made it, how many of them make it to the front lines and how many of them are this ragtag group of guys over here that's on the home front? They might get the odd gun, you know?
Right.
I don't know.
That's what that's what we talked about the other day. I think if they were used in the capacity of holdout, probably be for rear echelon, because one, why not give them a 51 Navy or a regular, the smaller, lighter Dragoon? I really believe that if you were handed one of those, you'd go, why do I get the old version? I want the newer version, the lighter one that everybody wants to carry.
I want the one, but like you said,
I want the new one.
You found a lot of them with converted. You find a lot of them with converted loading levers with Dragoon style.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes, I've seen even with the 1860 Army style latches.
Yeah.
The ones that I've ever seen that I know for a fact were used in the war that I've personally seen, most of them, actually almost every single one of them, the loading lever was modified in some way. It usually had like a 51 Navy style front latch. Kind of silly looking because it's the later latch. Not like the Dragoon, but like a 51 Navy or an 1860 Army. And it basically looks like somebody cut half it and then they ended up welding on 2 halves and then just dovetail in the front piece so it snaps in. It's kind of what they look like.
But I also have to stop and remember that the Confederacy had so few revolvers of their own. You probably issue it to everybody, but they had a lot of 51 Navies. A lot.
Yes, they did.
51 Navies.
And honest to God, like we were saying, in normal revolver ranges and normal revolver distances, the Walker wouldn't have done anything that 1860 Army, 51 Navy, or Dragoon wouldn't do. I mean, if you're loading from paper cartridges, for one, if you ever use paper cartridges, the Walker's no near strong as it should be. You're basically shooting the same load out of a Dragoon or even a 1860 Army if they're all the same size load paper cartridges.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just carrying around a heavier gun than everybody else.
During the 1850s, there were special bullets made for the Dragoons. You got that
Right.
260 grain sugarloaf, 230 some grain sugarloaf bullet.
Yeah, I think it was like 230 grains, if I remember right.
260 grains is the 1851 Dragoon bullet for the third model Dragoon, which everybody a lot of people call that a Walker bullet. I have contention with that because by 1851 the Walkers are either converted in the hands of somebody else, like natives, or somebody stole a few of them, or they're in the arsenal.
Yeah.
So I don't think, and by 1860 they've backed it down to what, 230 for the Johnson and Dow.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Before that, they were 220 for the Pickett needle nose. Some people say 170, but I have a hard time believing that. That's a big stretch between 170 and 220 for those Pickett needle nose bullets.
Well, Pickett was right around between 200 and 220.
Yeah, that's what I understand. And that in and of itself means that even with 60 grains, you're going to be just a little less powerful probably than that single action army with a 40 grain charge. Okay.
And you know for a fact you're not going to get 60 grains in one of those either. You're only going to get about 40 grains.
Not with a picket. Not with a picket.
Yeah, I know.
Joe Namath said we need more Ruger old armies. Yes, we do. So then they wouldn't be nearly as expensive. Let's see. There was a couple.
I've never played with one. I've always wanted to.
Let's see. Hardy had a question. He said, "So, and this is an important point. How do you classify guns being around rather than existing? A buddy of mine keeps saying they had machine guns in the Revolution. I maintain that having a few oddball things does not mean having machine guns."
That's a good point.
The puckle gun is
I would look at it is almost, well, they really didn't separate. There were special units back in the day. There wasn't quite like it is today, but I think if you had highly specialized weapons, it's going to be at the very tip of the spear. Specialized units that would get them.
Mm-hmm.
Like how the Texas Rangers ended up with the Walkers, for instance, right? But it would all depend on how many were made. And I'm sure they were everywhere. And if you're just unlucky to fight, if you got on the opposite end of one.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That is kind of hard to correlate. Because I'm sure somebody was shot and killed with one, but it wasn't common, though.
Yeah.
Jeremy, Garrett, where did you find that about the 500 winding up in the arsenal in New Mexico?
That is... might actually be mostly because there's not a lot of info on it. I actually read that in an online article, and I might have read it in Doug Duke's book, but I can't remember. But yeah, because there's just not a lot of info on it.
Right.
But anyway, but I'll find that source. I did have one book source that talked about them winding up there, but I don't remember what it was. Jeremy wants to know, have y'all seen CNR's video on the Colts? Videos? Yeah, I've seen them.
I know you have. I don't think you have, Garrett. You've been like, I don't want to watch any of it because I don't want to get any opinions from.
When I was running my series right along with his, which I was actually coming out with a little ahead of him, but it got to where I wasn't watching him just because I didn't want to accidentally plagiarize something he'd said. And so I think I watched the first two, which was, I had already made my video a long time before that. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't mind. I know Othias. I've spent some time with him. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't mind. But
I think they do a good job for what they can.
They do. Yeah, they do. They started out using Pyrodex. I guess that's okay. But that's about the only thing I had issues. I'm sure he's cleared that up by now. Sleepy Leap said, what resources do you guys suggest for images, stories about the Dragoon in use? Love Garrett's video. That was an old video. I could have made a lot longer video if I wanted to, by the way. So everything's not in there. Garrett's video, but it feels like there must be a lot to its story on the frontier with the military and others.
It's kind of all over.
Yeah, because these guys both have Snapper has the original Dragoon. Duke knows it. My thoughts on it are, once again, we're dealing with 25,000-ish altogether made of all the models. You're talking about a 10-year history of service, basically, from, well, maybe a little more, basically from 1848 to 1860. As far they're still used in the Civil War, but they become backline as the 60 Army takes over. But the trouble I have with studying it, and there's good stories, like take for instance Wild Bill Hickok. Definitely newspaper clippings in Kansas City recording that with his Dragoon revolver, Colt's Dragoon revolver. That's how they usually phrase it, Colt's Dragoon revolver, splitting a clamshell at 50 yards with a pistol. They show up. There's a lot of, if you read a lot of the, Duke could probably tell you about the mountain man doing the buffalo hunting with Colt's revolvers. The main issue I run into is when you read about it, you're going to, in all the references, they may say revolver or they may just say Colt's revolver. And
they don't specialize to say what gun it actually was. They might say the old belt model, or a Colt 6 gun.
Yeah. And the trouble is, it's like they don't always specify. And when they say a Colt's revolver, you're like, well, probably a Dragoon. But at that point, the 51 Navy is so popular, odds are it's a 51 Navy. Because it's way more popular.
Dragoons out here in the West.
Yeah, that's why I was going to say, you tell you what you think on it. I would say Doug Duke's book has quite a bit. Firearms of the Texas Rangers. And, of course, there's some stuff in Haven and Belden. But go ahead, Duke. What do you think?
Yeah, no, it's like, when you read about them going out and shooting buffalo with a revolver, they're using a Dragoon because there's no way that 51 Navy is going to penetrate into a buffalo.
Yeah.
And these guys, sometimes it's taking multiple shots to bring the animal down. But some of these guys are running right up next to it. They're hunting in what they called Indian fashion back in the day, which was running buffalo. You run up beside the animals that's running, and you shoot it. And that 51 Navy, I guarantee, is not going to penetrate deep enough to kill a buffalo, but that 44 will. But sometimes, too, I think they were doing what they call a Texas heart shot. Shooting them back where things are soft behind the rim. Because sometimes you read about that in some of the native hunting is they'll go up and they'll take their spears and they'll go in right behind the rib cage and go up into the heart. Well, you can take a shot there. If you land a shot behind the ear, that's pretty much, going to kill them right there. But then you also read about other guys that sit there and shoot a buffalo 27 times with a Colt revolver and just...
That's the one I was thinking of.
Angry.
Well, even didn't Hickok almost died because he shot a bear with a Dragoon?
Yep.
And it just bounced off its head? I mean, it was like, whoa.
Yep.
Cinnamon bear.
And then, Custer's tried shooting a buffalo with a pistol and killed his horse.
I forgot about that.
And he was using a Remington, most likely.
Well, that would explain it then.
But
you got go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, they and Desert Red, I just noticed on my end, commented on the book Prairie Traveler. I think they mentioned in there, too, that the Dragoon revolvers were decent for taking down larger game. But you read some of those, and a lot of those prairie guys, they did prefer a Dragoon revolver. A lot of them preferred a Navy revolver, but there were quite a few. A Navy revolver was considered a fighting revolver. Really, it was more for personal defense, whereas the Dragoon revolver, that's more of a general purpose, multiple use.
So the question kind of was, can you give him any references to books with images or stories of the service?
Not off the top of my head, other than Desert Rat 45 gave that one, the Prairie Traveler. That's a really good one. Sitting here trying to think. The one that I was thinking of with the guy that shot him 27 times, that's Indian War of 1864 by Eugene Ware. And Eugene Ware was a captain in Company F of the 6th Iowa Cav. And I'm pretty sure he was using the 1860 Army. He might have had a 51 Navy. But he talks about it at Fort Phil Kearny. They went out and was killing buffalo with their revolvers. Well, he goes out by himself and he tries to kill this buffalo. And this buffalo his head was matted with mud. And he said that the bullet just kept bouncing off of that matted mud until finally he got one lucky shot that went through and penetrated and killed it. But yeah, that was the 1860 Army wouldn't be as tough on a buffalo as a Dragoon would, because
A Dragoon would be.
Yeah, it's got a lot less powder behind it.
You got any sources, Snap? I'm sure you do.
Not really, because you got to realize they were used all over the place. Yeah, I would say your best idea to try to find to make sure that it is an actual Dragoon when you're reading is make sure it's before the year of 1860.
Yep.
44 caliber.
And then if they're talking about bigger game, then it's obviously going to be a Dragoon if they say Colt's revolver.
Or they call it a holster pistol.
Yeah, I've seen it called a holster pistol, the old model holster pistol. They called it several different things. I've even seen it called the belt pistol once, which didn't make any sense to me because I thought that was like the Navy, but whatever.
Yeah, that was kind of how Colt advertised them, as belt pistol, pocket pistol, and holster pistol.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And those are the terms you got to look for. You're not going to be able to really look for Dragoon. Your best idea would be look for the Colt holster pistol and historic references, and that will most likely, and especially if it's before the year of 1860, or heck, even like 1862 or 3, the likelihood of somebody actually having an 1860 Army by 2 and 3. 2 is when they started really getting out there. You're still probably going to run into a lot of Dragoons. So, especially on the civilian side. Yeah, that's the only real advice I could give you is look for holster pistols.
Yep. Let's see here. There's a question here that's a good one by Carson Branham. And sorry, guys, if I'm missing the comments or we're way back up behind where you're watching live. I'm just going through them kind of easy. We're just having a conversation. But Carson asks, when did Colt switch from twisted cast iron to steel on the cylinders? My comprehension is that the walkers were all cast iron or twisted.
It was about 1860.
Well,
I'm trying to make sure I get you the right information here.
Yeah, because
I don't think they ever were using.
Yeah, because first
iron.
of all, let's define cast iron for walkers.
Yes. So when they made these guns, the barrel and the cylinder were not made from a cast iron. It was usually a crucible steel, or early forms of crucible steel, or hammered.
Or wrought iron.
Basically, where they'll hammer it out so they get as much impurities out of the iron. If you're hammer welding it, or like hammer forging a piece of iron, especially in a die, and it will remove a lot of those pieces. It's just not like they're cast or they're twisted and then they're just that's not how they were made. Now there were guns that did that. As a matter of fact, I got one over my shoulder here that has a twisted cast iron cylinder.
Yeah, I don't believe Colt ever actually did true twisted seals iron.
No. Most of the iron used in the gun, where it was like an iron where you would twist it, kind of the way you would think to make it stronger, would have been what they would have used in the frames, because then they would actually end up having to case harden that, because iron isn't hard. But the cylinder and the barrel were a forged iron, where it could be kind of hardened and a much more compact and much more beaten into shape. So there's no inclusions. It's just much stronger. So it wasn't really the same thing. They're kind of the same, but they're kind of not.
So what they used in there is wrought iron. What they called back then was hammered cast steel.
That's
steel.
What I say.
Yeah, it was. They didn't really call it iron. The frames were more of an iron, but the barrel and the cylinder were more of a steel, considerably.
Yeah, meets the definition of what we call wrought iron today. So what they did is they poured this bar basically cast a bar of cast iron, same cast iron in your skillet. And then they got it red hot and they beat the ever loving tar out of it.
Crap out of it.
To beat out all those inclusions. So if you've ever watched a blacksmith beating cast iron, raw iron even, down into an ingot, it throws sparks like crazy because they're beating all these impurities out of it.
Yep.
And that does make for a more stronger metal. However, it's extremely brittle.
There's also carbon added to that.
Is that big around because it had to be that big around to withstand that pressure. You had to have a chamber wall that was, I don't even know what the chamber wall thickness is on the outside of that cylinder, but you had to have it that much space because if you didn't have that much space, it was going to blow up.
Right.
And then the Bessemer process comes out. Now you can have that pressure with a thinner wall.
Yeah.
Right. And Garrett, what you're thinking of adding carbon in, that's more the Bessemer process.
But there is a difference in the contracts between hammer cast iron and hammer cast steel.
Yes.
Some carbon is added to this at some point. The contract in 1847 calls for an iron trigger guard and backstrap, iron gun frame, hammer cast steel barrel and cylinder.
Right.
And after I've studied it enough, I feel like Duke was saying, it starts out like you're casting a skillet, but it's after they've beat the living daylights out of it, it's way better than like what we think of cast iron.
Yeah.
And you're beating carbon into that too, because you're heating it in the forge. It's getting carbon introduced through the
from
forge.
the actual charcoal and whatnot in the forge, yes.
But it's it's not on the level of like a Woot steel where it's crucible steel. Crucible steel is extremely expensive and hard to make. They did,
and that's kind of what ended up being the later Bessemer process. It's a lot like crucible steel, but cheaper.
They did make that kind of steel, but it was so expensive and hard to make that you're not going to be able to produce a gun that anybody can do with it.
So Colt's first steel change, and I believe the question was on the cylinders, and Colt's altogether first steel change from that gun iron, which funny, they went to the brass trigger guard and frame. He had to fight to get that because it was easier to make. So originally Walkers were supposed to have all iron gun, but I digress. He gets his first true steel from England in 1858. The Bessemer process comes out, and immediately he starts plastering all over everything. Our guns are the toughest. Our guns are the strongest.
Yeah.
Silver spring steel. Michael Faraday came up with that, I believe. Silver spring steel. The only thing was he advertised this is 300 times stronger than our old guns. In reality, they've tested it recently. It's 16 times stronger than the old guns. So, and he still had guns blow up in the 1860s. But the propaganda, the machine was cranking out steel's better, and it was better.
Yeah.
But it really incrementally improves all the way through the 1860s. The funny thing is, during the Civil War, the British steel was so good that the U.S. government was buying British steel. And they actually had Pittsburgh, places like that, actually had iron strikes because America couldn't produce as good as steel. And so all the guys, and they were said the strike was so bad, they completely quit buying the British steel. And a lot of Civil War guns are actually made out of iron. Later ones, which is weird. Even the Colt contract guns that say made out of steel are actually made out of iron or a very, very lightly carbonated steel. But yeah, and it just increased and it increased and increased. And by the 1870s, the process has gotten so good that, it's obviously not like when they start proofing them for smokeless in 1902, but it's way better even than it was in 1860 and 1873.
Well, even Colt was using better steel like prior to that. The Walkers, once again, poor steel. Absolute poor steel. Because when you read the record, not only is it blown cylinders, it's blown barrels too. They're splitting barrels right down the middle.
Oh, yeah. They're splitting them right down the middle.
And then like I said, in 1848, when he's turning in Dragoons, he's having failures, about 10%, which is the Army considers acceptable. But by the time you get into that last delivery in 48, they're down to just a handful of failures. And so that tells you right there, he's already making improvements. Now I'm going to have to dig that up and find that.
And I'm sure that when there was a pistol that failed, Colt ate that price. Because especially you had to build the entire pistol for it to be tested. So Colt had to eat that price. He probably got to the point where it's like, if I buy better steel, I probably end up spending less because it's going to actually pass.
The thing about it is, Bings, it's got so many parts, is if the barrel and the cylinder burst, you just put new barrel and cylinder on it.
That is true.
And you call it a flux dragoon.
You call it a flux dragoon.
But Carson, just to kind of answer your question there, if you're still watching, hopefully, your best era to say that the change occurs is between 58 and 61. Starts changing over in 58. By 61, supposedly all the guns are made out of silver spring steel, which turns out to just be slightly better steel. High carbon
style spring steel.
Better carbon. Yeah. And if you go back and watch my 1860 Army video, I go into deep detail on that and give you all the carbon ratios between those years and everything, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
Now I'm going to have to dig for that letter because I know it's in here somewhere.
Holy.
Somewhere.
Okay, so Elect 361 said, my Remington new model Army is made in 1861. Reliable and accurate still to this day, taking hogs, whitetail, love for black powder season. To my knowledge, you know what I'm thinking here, Snapper? Did they make a new model Army in 61? It didn't come out until 63.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an old model Army in 1861. Maybe
it could be an old model.
Or a Beals.
It could be a Beals, but even then, like
61 for Remington to put out
really early. The average you normally see are 63.
63.
Like 63s?
When they get the contract.
Yeah.
Not saying it can't happen, but it's a very early one if that's the case.
That's a very early one. Everyone I've ever messed with was a 63 or 64 model.
All right, here's a good question. I think Duke and I can both throw some light on this. Duke, would you rather have a Smith & Wesson Model 1 or a broken Walker? You have to hand rotate the cylinder as your sidearm in the Civil War until you pick up something better.
Walker.
Broken Walker to you. You rotate that cylinder all day long versus a 22 short.
Broken Walker will crack a skull better than a Smith & Wesson number 1.
Yeah, you can always use it as a club, but still use it as a club.
Smith & Wesson number 1 is neither a club nor a gun, in my opinion.
It's like that little Remington I got. It's like after I shot that thing at the target, so it's like, man, it's barely even breaking the clay.
Yeah. Soylent Green said the Bessemer process was 1856. Not sure when Colt used that steel, though. You guys know. Yeah, 1858. 1858 is Colt's first order of Bessemer steel. And it's not actually even from Bessemer. It's from a couple of brothers company, but it's the same stuff. And we are down to the end of the comments. Electric said 1858 new Army. Well, yeah, but the 1858 only patent.
The 1858 is not actually the year of the gun. That's a patent on the barrel. Everybody calls them 58 Remingtons, but they actually came out later.
Yeah, so Remington first comes out with the Beals pocket revolver in 56, I believe. And it doesn't have that loading lever. It's different. It's a completely different animal. It doesn't sell very well. It fails. But they do patent a loading lever for it in 58. I know they start working on them at least in 62, maybe the patents. I'm pretty sure it don't come out till 63, but I could be wrong.
Every one I've ever messed with was a 63 or 64. I've never had messed with an actual new model army earlier than that. I've never even really.
Yeah.
It wouldn't shock me if they were out, but I don't think they were being mass produced for the Civil War at that time.
Yeah. Soylent Green.
They didn't have that kind of contract.
Yeah. Soylent Green has a good point. He said you can use a Smith & Wesson Model 1 as a projectile in your musket, though. Okay. Sleepy Leap said Walker was too easy. Bowie knife. Your blade length style of choice or Smith & Wesson Model 1? Well, I'm going to have a knife anyway. But then maybe the Smith & Wesson Model 1, because you got your bayonet and everything still. So
yeah, you're going to have that.
But if I only have one weapon, boy, you're in bad shape either way, because you're
pretty screwed if you have to decide between a knife and a Smith & Wesson number 1. You ain't gonna make it. You ain't gonna make it.
No knife if you get the Smith.
I'm probably gonna go for the knife because usually, just hear me out here. You're not gonna be going against somebody else with a revolver. They're gonna have a like single shot rifle with they're gonna have a bayonet. I don't know, man. That'd be hard because it's a lot harder to get close to somebody with a giant rifle and a bayonet if you have just a knife.
You're going to have to make that forehead shot count. That's all I can say.
So, in 1850, they tested 2,082 Colt Dragoon revolvers. 1 failed.
That's pretty darn good.
That's 50. That's
still real early too.
Yeah,
that's the beginning of good times.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when the whole empire started taking off.
After I think about it, I'm going with the Bowie knife because I don't trust myself to make that forehead shot.
But do you know what the thing about it too with that? Like, it's a 22 caliber pistol, right? It's the same thing as that little ribbing Iroquois I have.
With 3 grains of.
Man, I'm telling you, yeah, that's about right. Man, I think you just didn't want to penetrate anything for real. I think I even shot it at my plastic freaking trash can, and it didn't even make a hole in it.
At least with a good knife, when they get to you, you got something. Because if those shots don't work, and even if you got them bleeding and they're going to die tomorrow, that pistol is no good to you once they get up.
Right. Here's what I was looking for.
Man, that's a hard one right there. That's hard.
In 1848, 1,060 arms were tested, so 1,060. And 60 barrels and 53 cylinders burst, which is understood to be about the usual ratio of failures in common muskets and pistols. So in 1848...
What year was that again? 48?
That's in Haven, isn't it?
Yep. It's on page 307. 1848, 1,060 arms were tested, 60 barrels and 53 cylinders burst. In 1849... 1,011 arms, so 1,111 or 1,011 arms were tested, but 11 barrels and 30 cylinders burst. And in 1850, 2,082 arms were tested, only 1 barrel and 1 cylinder burst, showing much smaller proportion in defective arms. So Colt was getting better material.
Better and better and better.
Yeah. And I'm willing to bet in 48, there was probably a lot of leftover Walker parts.
Yeah. I'm telling you, one of these days when you guys ever get to see my Dragoon in person, I'm like 1,000,000% positive that cylinder on my Dragoon is a leftover Walker part. I really believe it is. It just, everything about it has the image, where the image is on the cylinder, it's a way far forward. And even part of it's cut off from, if you line it up with a replica Walker, it lines up perfectly. But if you line it up with a replica Dragoon, it's way up higher, like where a Walker's would have been when they did the image.
How many safety pins does it have?
I think it only had 1. I don't even think it's on the gun anymore. I don't think you can even see it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the safety pins are gone on that gun, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and then here the General Talcott says the only complaint that troopers had in the field was the flasks. Everybody hated the Colt flask.
It's a neat idea, but it was just too complex.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you have an 1861 Remington, you're talking about a Beals, not a new model Army. They're a lot alike,
Yeah.
grant you. But I believe they made the Beals from 61 to 62.
And the thing is, they didn't make that many Beals, so it wasn't like when they had the new model Army. They were cutting out a crap ton of guns all at once. The reason the Remingtons were bad, the new model Armies, the later ones, the biggest reason of that is they were producing more guns than they should have been. They couldn't keep the quality with the amount of guns they were producing. That was the reason why they're not the greatest. They're not like the end of the world, but they're not great.
You might have a Remington old model Army too, but the Beals Army model, not the Beals Pocket, and the Remington old model would be, because you're not going to see actual new Army until 1863, from what I can tell anyway. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Here's one referring to the hunting of buffalo, too. The Indians threw out the rest.
Oh, nice.
It was a great curiosity, expressed much so I want to show them the news play. Okay. Never mind. They don't. All he says is, he says here, well, on this long march when hunting or running buffalo, I seldom ever saw any other pistols used.
Other than the Dragoon?
Yep.
That would make sense. What other gun other than like a flintlock pistol with a larger caliber would you even want to hunt? I don't see the 49 pocket model or even the 51 Navy being a smart option to try to kill a buffalo. You'd be that guy who shoots 30 freaking times and the thing's still not dead.
KR Rabbit 1 asked, do you guys have any idea why Smith & Wesson only made the remake of the Schofield for a year or two?
I don't know. They probably did it like how some of the companies do it, where they make a small amount, so they try to make the market higher for them instead of making a whole bunch of them and flooding the market, making them cheap guns. They probably only decided to do so much because they didn't know if they would even sell that much.
And because by the time they probably made it and sold it, it cost more than an original. Well, not a Schofield maybe, but a Model 3.
They probably even looked at it at the time like, ours is a historic gun. I see this all the time with the older, like some of the companies, even like Colt. They still make the single action Army, but they don't do a lot of them anymore. They're kind of more of a custom order thing. And that's just because of the fact of, hey, if we make a bunch of these, if we just start making them, are they going to sell? It's always an upside. Like we always think, heck yeah, that'd be great. But how many people are really going to go out there and buy the old, antique version of the gun, brand new, to have it? It's more of the collector side. So they see it as it's not going to have as many potential buyers out there. So they'll probably do it as a special offering, and they'll probably even break even on them for the most likely. They're probably doing it out of the just love of doing it.
Yeah. Electric said it's a first contract was 63. This one, not sure how, but yep, 1861, new model, pre-contract. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't studied
that's
it
pretty interesting.
You'll have to see that someday. Even probably pretty rare.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you might have a real rare bird there, buddy.
A few more questions here. All right.
Oh, ain't that nice?
Questions.
They actually ended up adding the Confederate version of the Colt revolver. They're talking about brevet model. So it's basically here's one Gunnison. And here's a Leech and Rigdon. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, Hardy. Yeah, we're a pretty small. We're a pretty small segment of the overall firearms world. Just look at the YouTube numbers for us versus some other people.
Yeah, you make a video on an AR-15, your channels. There's many more people into that than there are into this, but I find this a little bit more exciting and interesting.
Yep. It's to be honest, I like it smaller this way. You get a lot better quality of people when you're making these kind of videos than you do a lot of times if you do the modern stuff. And
there's a story to everything too. That a lot more like fun. At the beginning of this, when you hear Duke talking, he's like, "Yeah, you can have the gun, but if you don't have the story, what is the gun?" I mean,
right.
To me, the biggest difference between like a brand new 1911 and a World War I 1911, what's the difference? The story, realistically, the story is the difference. And the story is kind of like the largest, coolest part of this. You pick up something from the 1800s, oh yeah, it's pretty cool and stuff. But if you know the history behind it, it makes it much cooler.
Yep. Black Powder Firearms Enthusiasts, a great live show. Have to go. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to run. We're
Good night, brother.
2.5 hours, so we probably, what do you say, guys, run to 2.5. That's about 9 more minutes.
Yeah, that'll work.
How long?
What did you say, Duke?
I'm trying to find something.
Can't make that long.
Getting sleepy?
Yeah.
Duke's back in his hometown.
Yep, we're back down in Colorado.
We've had a great chat tonight. Between all three channels, we ran average 65.
Nice.
Not bad at all.
Very nice.
That's pretty good for not having Jake on here. Hardy said most people would say, "Oh, that's cool." Oh, by the way, up here a little bit ago, somebody asked, I think it was Alligator Horse, asked if we would do a Q&A live on trapdoors. That's kind of, these guys know them. That's kind of more my thing. But I guess if you want to sometime, guys, we can. If you got any questions on it, throw it out there right now. I'll be glad to answer them if I can.
You could be the information getter, and me and Duke can read the comments.
Yeah, man, I really want to start that series. I said before Halloween, but it's been backed off again on account of the muzzleloader not getting here yet. So a little bit. Probably have to do the Thanksgiving stuff first, and then we'll go back to that when I get a chance. Keep backing it off. I know. I'm sorry.
I think we can start with the Charleville and work his way up. Just instead of the Trapdoor series, the Springfield series.
Like I said, I'll do that later, but the amount of books it would require and the price of those books is insane to start there.
He already has an investment of a small car.
Yeah, I got an investment
of a
more
big
than that.
Car
at this point.
A big car.
There's $17,000 wrapped up in this series, and we haven't even started yet.
You ain't even started yet.
Tell Caleb he's going to have to start working overtime.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Tell him he can't get hitched yet.
Okay, so yeah.
Oh, don't ever let that happen. We're all going to lose our abilities to fund guns if Caleb ever gets hitched. He's not allowed to even have girlfriends.
That's what you think. Anyway, KRR Rabbit 1 said, "Have any of you guys done any videos on the Patterson reproductions? I could sure use a tutorial on breaking it down to clean it." Okay. I'm going to do this. I'll take the Pieta side, and Duke can take the Uberti side. Yes, I have got a video on the Patterson. My Patterson has fired exactly, well, it's actually Caleb's Patterson, has fired exactly 12 shots, and it may never fire anymore because it was so bad out of time when it came from the factory. We worked and worked and worked to get that thing back in time. The loading lever on it broke. Honestly, you better be a gunsmith if you're going to buy a Pieta, is all I can say. Duke has reviews, I think, on both. No, he has a review on the Uberti.
Yep. No, the Patterson or the Pieta one. By the time I bleeped out all the curse words in that video, I was speaking in Morse code.
Deep, 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 dot, beep.
Bleep, 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 bleep.
And I tore that piece out. hell, I'm on Garrett's channel. I tore that thing apart. I had it completely disassembled on my table in here. I fitted parts. It took me 3 weeks because it'd take me a full day to take it apart and lay it out and then fix the part, and then it'd take me a full day to put the damn thing back together. I already cursed. I'm already in trouble.
Didn't you like ping the living crap out of the arbor on yours or the
I got done
locking wedge
thing back to where it was just working perfectly. The wedge decided it was going to fall out of the barrel one day, and I got mad. So I went and took that wedge to an anvil, took a ball peen hammer, hammered the crap out of it. It wouldn't go back in the wedge slot, so I took that same ball peen hammer and I hammered it in.
And it's still in.
It's at. It will not.
and it's still in it. It ain't going nowhere.
It wiggle out on me, but it don't come out very easy. But it did wiggle out on me. I had the barrel and cylinder off, but no. The only thing I could say is invest in an ultrasonic cleaner. Put it down in there. Hope to God the screws don't come loose. That or just dump a lot of oil in the back. Take the back strap off and just shoot oil down into that action. But don't ever take it apart.
Well, here's and you'll never see a video on us doing it either, because like I said, we did it once and it was like a week-long project. And I don't know what like Duke has said, I agree. Nobody knows how to build them or time them.
They can put them together.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but you loved your
I need to get one. I've never even played with one.
Yeah, my Uberti. Oh, that thing's perfectly timed. It's beautiful. And I don't shoot it because I don't want you to break anything on it because I can't replace the part.
He's not going to take it apart to replace the part.
I found out one thing, that Uberti is much better put together than the Pieta is.
Oh, yeah. Sleepy Leap talking about cartridge Colt. That's fine. It's not a hard, fast rule. Alligator Horse said, mostly about ammo. I have a really nice 1881 manufactured carbine, Black Hills Cowboy ammo. Primers, HMS Cowboys, fine. Okay, so Black Hills ammo, Pierce's primers, HSM Cowboy ammo shoots fine. Difference, okay.
That's because, if I remember right, HMS
softer.
Is using a Winchester primer and Black Hills using a CCI primer.
I have a book that may be the only copy of this book in existence. This little pamphlet costs $200. But as far as cartridges, in 1881, and you're talking, and you said it's carbine. Okay, so in 1881, they are going to be using let's see. Yeah, they won't change the cartridge for the G versus. These are all the different cartridges right here. And so they're going to use the same carbine cartridge, and if I'm correct here, 81. 3. Yes, they will be still using the internal. What is it called? The Bennett. Because
the Bennett primer, the internal one.
The rifles will convert to an external primer in 81, but the carbines will not convert to that external primer until 82. And I can't remember if there's a change in the length of the firing pin or not, but I think there was a very small, minute change for that.
But one thing I've noticed is that, Black Hills, I've had Pierce primers on my 73 single action. They're using CCIs. Sometimes CCI primers are a little thin.
Yeah, and I think that's true too, and a little hard, so it'll punch through versus bend.
But Winchester primers are definitely a harder primer. I've got guns that they will not go off it.
Mm-hmm. I just use CCI. I haven't had any trouble with it, but mine has had the 1882 update on it because it's a star. So I believe there's a slight change in a firing pin, either angle or length, but I can't remember. But it's in this book. If you ever find a copy, you want to know, it's cartridges for the Springfield trapdoor rifles and carbines, 65 through 98. And I don't know if there's another copy, to be honest, but if you can find one, that's what you need. Because like I said, in 1882, they're going to send all that stuff back in and fix it. So if you still have an original 1881 carbine without the changes in 1882, that's a star mark, that's kind of a rare gun. Okay. I lifted above, said, my first time on the live stream, nice place to be. My interests are the old cartridges, rifle and pistol, brought into modern performance. Really discovered you guys through Plowboy's Ghost. Yeah, Plowboy had a chance to be here tonight, but he couldn't quite make it. So, kick it. Okay. Hey, we know Duke's back in Colorado now.
Yeah, it's a train.
10 o'clock train is 2 minutes late.
He just wanted to know how to disconnect concert. I think he meant disconnect the main string. I couldn't tell you. It's been so long since I had that thing. Even saw it.
It doesn't have a mainspring kind of similar to the Walker, where you actually have to use a spring clamp.
Yeah, but it's not like the Walkers per se.
It's not. Yeah.
Soylent Green said I have an early Pieta and unfired one. After the headache it was, he's talking about Patterson's, to take apart the old one after shooting. I just got to dunk it in a bucket of water and ballast all and shake it. It's a good way to do the Pieta. He said he can't.
I got to get my hands on one of those. It's crazy hard to believe they're that bad, but it wouldn't shock me.
He says he can't get the mainspring to release the little T-spur. Yeah, you might need some kind of spring clamp, spring vise.
If you cock a gun, right? If you cock it, and if that, speaking, because I've never messed with a Patterson though, being that it has that little spur on, I'm guessing what you would do is when you cock it is you put a spring vise on it to hold it down, and then you uncock it, and then that will actually give you a bunch of room to wiggle everything around and take it apart. But that's with a normal V-spring. I don't know if that's exactly the same on that gun.
Does anybody know if Army San Marco made a Patterson? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think they did.
I don't know.
Okay. Carson wants to know, how do you load the Patterson without taking it apart? Long and short answer is, if it's an early model, you don't. You take it apart because you got to cap it. But not all Pattersons were like that.
I kind of wish I'd have bought that one you guys found. There was I think that was an Army San Marco that had that loading lever. It was one they made that had a loading lever and a little cut on the side of it, like the really late Pattersons. Yeah, a nice gun.
Standard Patterson doesn't have a cut and a recoil shield to cap, so you got to take it apart. And when you got it apart, you use a little tool in the arbor as a loading lever. But they did fix that later on. Yeah, and Soylent Green said the most annoying part is some of the parts can go back in there incorrectly, and the gun will still go back together but not work. Absolutely.
Oh.
Okay, a few more here, guys, and then we're going to quit. I'm going to scroll down through here and look for questions. Let's see. Yeah, I bet you alligator horse. I bet you that is because of the, like Duke said, probably CCI primers. And I have to confirm exactly what was changed, if anything was changed. But I know that the ammunition changed after that. But yours would be designed technically to fire the internal primed Bennett primers, I believe they're called. And that looks like about it. So you go over on Duke Frazier. What do you got, Duke? You got some shorts out, don't you?
I got one out.
I got to go over and watch it.
Yeah, eventually we're going to get some more going.
Yeah. You got any videos you're thinking about doing eventually and before you come down here? Or just shorts?
Get out to Kansas, maybe.
Snapper, you got any videos coming?
Yeah, I got several, actually. I got one on a LeMat coming. I got one on the rifle, the 73 Winchester coming. one on the Remington Iroquois coming, one on my single action army again coming, and one on, what else did I shoot? I think that's it. But yeah, I've got a bunch filmed from the other day, the last weekend, and the weekend before that I went out and shot and did a crap ton of filming, and I just got to finish editing a little bit, and yeah, I got several videos about to come out.
Very good. Well, surprisingly, we do not have a video tomorrow morning just because things have been so busy. We usually film them on Sundays, and I was gone for 2 Sundays or a Sunday there with Duke a couple weeks ago, and then we got back and had to work a Sunday, and then my grandpa's funeral was last Sunday, so we are completely out of videos. So you might have to wait a week. I think we're going to have to call it a week off and hopefully get a pumpkin carving video and maybe some flintlock stuff out a week from tomorrow. But yeah, sorry about that. No video on 11 Bang Bang tomorrow, but we'll try to get back to our regularly scheduled videos as soon as we possibly can.
Tell Caleb go out and shoot another gator.
Yeah,
that was fun. It's a little gator.
Yeah, I have 2 really nice Winchesters. One made in 1889, and one made in 1919 or 18. Oh, that's cool. All right,
yeah, I got a real nice one. I like it. Thanks to Garrett.
Oh, I was going to ask you, did you get that reloading equipment yet?
Yeah, a matter of fact, I loaded like 200 rounds of ammo yesterday with it. I actually just kind of sitting there listening to podcasts and just click, 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 and before you know it, there's 200 rounds of ammo sitting there.
Sweet.
Okay, so what are we doing on Tales of the Trails, dude?
We're going to talk about something historical.
We talked. We were going to do the Santa Fe Trail. We were so excited to do it at one point.
Yeah, we was going to do Santa Fe Trail and Tobin Tobin, and what the hell was the third one? I don't remember, but yeah, we're going to get into those one of these days.
So we don't know what day next week, just possibly a day next week.
Possibly a day next week, if not the week after. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm thinking, what's 2 weeks from tonight? Let's see.
The 21st.
But we can't set it for sure because we don't know what your hours are going to be. So that'll be 1 week from tonight. So I'm going to say somewhere between Wednesday the 25th and Saturday the 28th, if it works out somewhere in that, or the 29th. Want to do a, what do you guys think about doing a Halloween show right before Halloween where we just talk about Old West ghosts and spooks and stuff like that just for a little while?
We could do that.
I think that'd be
We
fun,
definitely do
Halloween
that.
special. And I'll definitely, guys, I wanted to get Caleb on tonight and Ethan. Didn't work out. Definitely get Caleb and Ethan, and maybe we can find a few more guests and do a Halloween special. So in 2 weeks, someday the day is not set until we find out what Duke's schedule is going to be.
Yeah, Caleb's got to come in and atone for that Remington comment earlier.
So anyway, you guys got anything else? Or are we done?
Higher for tonight.
As always, guys, trust in God. Keep your powder dry. Bye.